Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. It's Pride! Magic Presents Pride is a casual commander event Wizards has brought back this June. You build a commander deck, treating every eligible commander as though it has the partner keyword, because Magic is for everyone. Then you show up at your local game store and play Commander, hopefully against other Pride decks. This year, participants are supposed to receive the sweet foil Gilded Lotus promo, as well as an enamel pin of that lotus. Local game stores can schedule Pride events for June 5th through 14th in one of these select regions. And since that window has already ended, I hope you made it to one. But if you missed it, check with your local game store to see if they ran a Pride event and if they're planning to run a repeat. And if they aren't, ask them to. WPN locations are always looking for ways to get more players in store, and they often have leftover promos to give out. And whether or not you play in a store-sanctioned event, you can always play your Pride deck as a Rule 0 deck anytime. Just ask your pod and shuffle up. This event was how I launched my channel last year, so my Monday deck techs during June have all been Pride decks. Check out the playlist linked in the video's description if you want to see the other decks I cooked up. Anyway, let's get to it. As you see, today our commanders are Halana and Alena partners, and Kynaios and Tiro of Miletus. Like my Greasefang deck, linked in the video's description, I first built this deck last year when I launched my channel, so this updated version keeps the same game plan but benefits from, well, a year of experience building decks. Hopefully it's an improvement. Before we check it out, however, let's go over our deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander, or in this case, commanders. I want to show off why these cards are so great and why I put them at the head of my deck. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commanders ask of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commanders. Kynaios and Tiro of Miletus is a 2/8 legendary human soldier for a red, a green, a white, and a blue. So Ink Treader Nephilim mana? It says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Each player may put a land card from their hand onto the battlefield, then each opponent who didn't draws a card. So for us, this is Growth Spiral. We get to draw a card and then put a land into play. It doesn't even come in tapped if it wouldn't have otherwise. Each of our opponents gets the choice of either putting a land into play or drawing a card, but we get to do both, and it's in the most effective order. And Halana and Alena Partners is a 2/3 legendary human ranger for 2, a red and a green, with first strike, reach, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of 1/1 counters on another target creature you control equal to Halana and Alena's power. That creature gains haste until end of turn. Both of our commanders have a lot in common. First, their card names are a mouthful. It's my opinion that when playing this deck, you should always insist on saying all 4 names every time, Halana and Alena and Kynaios and Tiro of Miletus. But it's also acceptable to refer to both cards by their nicknames, the Gruul Friends and the Gay Kings. I'll be using names and nicknames interchangeably in this video. Something else our commanders have in common is that they're both fan favorites. Kynaios and Tiro are a widely loved group hug commander, as they're the founders and guardians of Miletus, a polis of Theros known for philosophy and peace. The Gruul Friends, Halana and Alena, are respectively a ranger and a trapper, both from Innistrad, who showed up in flavor text all the way back in Dark Ascension and Evasion Restored, then returned during Shadows Block's flavor text, and finally got their own cards with the new partner keyword in Commander Legends. Now their partnership has made it to their card name, and their inclusion in Foundations is one more instance of inclusion being foundational in Magic. But what are these 4 characters doing together in our deck? When I first assembled it last year, the idea was a bit of a play on getting to say so many characters' names when I introduced my commanders, and I called the deck This Apartment is Getting Crowded. But as it came together, its vibe changed from cramped cohabitation to an open doorway and plenty of room for anyone who wants to stop by. So our deck is Legends. Kynaios and Tiro and Halana and Alena's friends are a fun, diverse bunch, and our deck's goal is to introduce our opponents to every one of them. We want each player at the table to feel like they've been personally invited to a backyard barbecue full of good food and better conversation. No one hosts like our couples, and with the Gay Kings giving players cards in hand or lands in play at the end of each of our turns, it's like we're telling opponents to grab a plate because here, everybody eats. The Gruul Friends aren't slacking either. The counters they put on our creatures ensure the endless friends we're fielding end up stronger than their printed stats. Combined with the acceleration the kings give us, we're ready to welcome new friends to the cookout every turn and to stuff them full of counters and potato salad alike. Before long, our opponents will be staring down a big board of bigger creatures, wondering how we managed to help them develop their plans while still surpassing them with our own. The answer, of course, is teamwork. Our legends all supplement what we're doing in some way, giving us extra value from Halana and Alena's counters, rewarding us for the draw and ramp from Kynaios and Tiro's instep triggers, or a mix of both. Each of our guests complements the others like a dish at a properly planned potluck. And while not everyone at the party gets along perfectly, they all realize we're in this together. They know that a rising tide lifts all boats, so there's no need to rock this one. The only real goal is to make our time together a good one. One that leaves no one left out or wondering if they belong. They do. You do. After all, this is the gathering. Everyone's invited, everyone's welcome, because Magic is for everyone. You'll enjoy this deck if you're a fan of playing legendary creatures with powerful effects and seeing how much stronger they are in tandem, or if you like the idea of simulating a party full of fascinating people, each with a story that'll get the whole table talking. So, as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section, stuffed to the brim, full of cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which, for me, didn't make the cut. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you like what I've done here and you want to go harder with even more legends, or if you're interested in focusing more on one of our commanders than the other, rather than kind of splitting the difference, that considering section is a great place to begin when you build your own Halana and Alena and Kynaios and Tiro of Meletus deck. So let's begin. We're going to go to the first and most fun part of our deck, which is our Legends section. These are all cards that are either legendary creatures or legendary spells in some other way, and give us a reason to talk about their stories at the table. We're going to start with Big Mike. This is Mikaeus the Lunarch, X and a white for a 0/0 legendary human cleric that comes in with X/1/1 counters on him, and says tap to put a counter on him, or tap and remove a counter from him to put a 1/1 counter on each other creature you control. Notably, both of these can be activated at instant speed. So maybe we block with Mikaeus when he is a 4/4, and we're blocking a 4/4, and then before damage, we can tap him. He's still blocking, he becomes a 5/5 and eats the defending player, or the attacking creature. Or maybe we have a way to do a similar thing with our other creatures by removing a counter from Mikaeus and then putting those counters on everyone. Particularly, this is nice with Halana and Alena because we can go to our start of combat, we can put counters from Halana and Alena's trigger on Mikaeus, and then tap Mikaeus, remove one of those counters, and put that counter we removed on every other creature. So we're sort of multiplying the number of counters that Halana and Alena give us one at a time. Pretty neat. Next up is Dyadrine, Synthesis Amalgam. I love Dyadrine. This is such a cool card. I even made a commander deck out of Dyadrine when Edge of Eternities was the most recent set in Standard. So yeah, check that out in the video's description. Dyadrine is a 0/1 legendary artifact creature construct with trample that costs X, a green, and a white, and enters with a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana that we spent to cast it. So even if X is 0, we're spending 2 mana to cast it, assuming no discounts, and so it'll come in as a 2/3 for 2 with trample. Cool. Dyadrine has a great story behind it. It's like a probe sent to I think a moon, and over time it's sort of not checked on by the people that left it there, so it starts to evolve and break down, and it starts putting organic parts into itself as a way to repair itself, and those organic parts kind of become part of it, and so it becomes both a construct and a living being. Synthesis Amalgam. Anyway, just a cool story. Yeah, it also says, whenever you attack, you may remove a 1/1 counter from each of 2 creatures you control. That means you have to remove a single 1/1 counter from one creature and from another creature. You can't take 2 counters off of the same one. And if you do that, you draw a card and you make a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token, because Dyadrine has a little baby. Anyway, very cool card. I loved the commander deck I built for this, and it works really well in this deck because we're putting a bunch of counters on our stuff. Next is Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard. This is a 2-mana 3/3, a green and a red, for a 3/3 legendary human soldier from the Brothers' War. Important back in the Brothers' War story, especially the Brothers' War set that we got several years ago. Hajar only has one ability. Sacrifice him, and all of our legendary creatures get +1/+0 and indestructible until end of turn, which is great. Every creature we have in this deck that isn't a token we've generated is legendary. So Hajar protects our entire board from board wipes, from removal spells, whatever it may be, as long as it's not something that either exiles or, Toxic Deluge gives -X/-X, that kind of thing. So yeah, Hajar is a nice presence in this deck as a way to protect all of our creatures and give them a little bit of pump in the process. Next we have Joriel, Monvoli Recluse. Joriel, important character in the story from Dominaria. Love this character. Also, incredible art by Izzy. So 1 and a green for a 1/2 legendary human druid that says, whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 cat creature token. It's a green cat. They look green, I guess. Anyway, these cats that we get, it seems like this goes in a deck that's meant to draw a lot of cards, and luckily the Gay Kings draw us a card during each of our end steps. Now we only get that cat if it's the second card we drew, not every card beyond the first, but still, a free extra cat at least at our end step. Every turn we have Joriel and the Gay Kings in play. Sounds great to me. In addition, for 4 and double green, we can, until end of turn, give all of our creatures base power and toughness equal to the number of cards in our hand, which is amazing, because we're going to have such a full hand so much of this game. We're drawing so many cards off of so many of our creatures, but also off of one of our commanders. So even if we're saying, we've got like 4 cards in hand, sometimes our creatures are going to be bigger than that, but most of the time, that's going to give a nice pump to many of our creatures, particularly Joriel herself and all of these cats. And if many of our creatures are huge, it's probably because they're huge thanks to the counters we've gotten. Giving them a larger base power and toughness adds to what the counters are already giving them. So yeah, just a nice sort of surprising, expensive, but instant speed pump effect that we can apply to all of our creatures at some point. Next we have Ruby Daring Tracker. This is Little Red Riding Hood from Wilds of Eldraine. For a green and a red, we get a 1/2 legendary human scout with haste that says whenever she attacks while we control a creature with power of 4 or greater, she gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So if we have a ferocious creature, then she attacks as a 3/4. That's great. Notably, she also taps for a red or green, which are the colors that both of our commanders share, and she has haste. So we can pay a red and a green to get Ruby into play and immediately tap her for a red or a green, sort of getting a little bit of a discount on her if we've got another spell to cast that turn. Nice. Tam, Mindful First Year, another important character in the story. I have a deck for a different version of Tam. This is the Lorwyn Eclipse version, but we recently got a Secrets of Strixhaven version, so check the video description for that Tam. But this Tam is, just to clue you in, this is sort of Jace and Vraska's daughter. Not exactly, because Jace sort of created her whole cloth. This video is being recorded before Reality Fracture has dropped, so we don't know what else has gone on with Tam. But yeah, a really cool character, a Gorgon Wizard. That is a 2/2 for 1 and a hybrid Simic mana, so either 1 in a green or 1 in a blue. Tam says each other creature you control has hexproof from each of its colors, which means Tam doesn't get this because it says other creatures, but Halana and Alena can't be targeted by any source that is green or source that is red from any of our opponents. The Gay Kings can't be targeted by anything that isn't black or colorless, because they've got hexproof from everything else. That's crazy. This is just a very powerful, broad effect in a deck that's full of so many multicolored cards. And we can tap Tam, and target creature we control becomes all colors until end of turn. So if we need to protect someone, Tam is sort of our mother of runes. Doesn't give protection, but does give hexproof from every color. And that's pretty good. The only thing that creature could then be hit by is something colorless, like a Meteor Golem. Yeah. Next we have Erdnan Dramoka Warrior. This is a really cool Foundations Jumpstart legend that I always want to put into counters decks, and it doesn't always fit, but here, Erdnan works well. 1 and a white for a 1/1 legendary human warrior that when it enters, it puts a 1/1 counter on target creature. So it could be a 2-mana 2/2, because it doesn't say another target creature. And whenever we attack, target attacking creature with a 1/1 counter on it gains first strike until end of turn, and if that counter has 2 or more 1/1 counters on it, it instead gains double strike. So this is very powerful for us. It gives one of our creatures, it's not each creature with counters, it's a triggered ability that gives a target attacking creature, not each creature you control, or whenever a creature you control attacks, it would be a similar situation. So this is only one creature, but being able to put at least 2 counters on something is what Halana and Alena does, the very first time it triggers, because it's got a power of 2 at the start. So we're able to take counters and take our commander, put counters on things, and Erdnan makes those things attack with double strike, as long as they're the only thing that we've targeted with this. Everything else may not be attacking with double strike, but it's still attacking with a bunch of counters on it, and that's pretty good too. So yeah, pretty nice. Next up is Arwen, Weaver of Hope, obviously from Lord of the Rings. This is 1 and double green for a 2/1 legendary elf noble who is a great option, a great target for us to hit with Halana and Alena the first chance we get, because each other creature we control enters with a number of additional 1/1 counters on it equal to Arwen's toughness. So with Arwen in play, all of our creatures are coming in with at least 1 extra counter on them. But if we trigger Halana and Alena once, before even their power has grown, Arwen is going to get 2 counters and become a 4/3, and thereby give every creature we have that enters 3 1/1 counters. And if Arwen grows from that, maybe from Kynaios, then yeah, we're just going to keep building up and building up. Oh, forgot about this. All right, let's keep moving on. Another recent Lorwyn Eclipsed card is Brigid Klocken's Heart. This is 2 and a white for a 3/2 legendary Kithkin warrior that when it enters or transforms into Brigid, we make a 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature token. So Brigid is a 3-mana 3/2 that comes with a 1/1 for free. Just, we get a friend. And at the beginning of our first main phase, we may pay a single green, and if we do, we transform Brigid into Brigid Dune's Mind. This is another 3/2 legendary Kithkin soldier, but rather than entering or transforming into it and making a creature, this Brigid taps for a green or white, or an amount of green or white rather, equal to the number of creatures we control. So, and then at the beginning of our first main phase, we can pay a white to transform Brigid back to Klocken's Heart, which will, again, have her transform into Brigid and make another Kithkin. So if we play Brigid the first time, for 2 and a white, she comes in, we get a Kithkin as well. The start of our next turn, we can pay a green, flip her over, and now she taps for 2 green or 2 white. So we're down a green to transform her that first time, but we're still tapping for an aggregate of 1 at least, even if those are the only creatures we have on the battlefield. If we have more creatures, then this is tapping for a lot more. And the next turn, it's going to trigger at the start of our first main phase. We don't have to flip Brigid back over. We can just keep her as a mana dork, making a huge amount of mana for us. Or if we want more counters, not counters, but more tokens, we can flip her back over, we get another Kithkin, and we can choose to keep her there if we want to, but she doesn't make that Kithkin every turn unless she is transforming into Brigid. So a lot of the times we keep her on the backside and keep tapping for mana. Since this deck is a little bit mana hungry, because we are mana intensive on our colored pips, Brigid can be really helpful to us, since green and white are our most represented colors in the deck. Next up, we have Glunch the Bestower from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. A wonderful set, full of stories, big fan of this. So 1, a green and a white for a 0/5 flying legendary jellyfish that says at the beginning of your end step, choose a player. It can be us if we want it to be. They put 2 1/1 counters on a creature they control, then we choose a second player who will draw a card, and we choose a third player to make 2 treasure tokens. So this happens every turn. Every one of our end steps, someone's going to draw a card, someone's going to make 2 treasures, and someone's going to put 2 counters on a creature. Usually it's going to be us who gets one of those boons, and then we're helping out our other opponents in another way. Glunch exists here because the Gay Kings are still doing a little bit of group hug stuff, so we want to do a little more of it with Glunch. And to fix ourselves up with whatever we need. Maybe we need an additional card in hand. Maybe we need more counters than just what the Gruul Friends are giving us. Maybe we need to fix our mana or accelerate ourselves a little bit. Particularly, this is an instep trigger, so we can stack this trigger with the trigger from the Gay Kings so that Glunch's trigger resolves first. And if we've chosen to draw a card, that gives us a better chance that when the Gay Kings let us draw a card and then put a land into play, we've definitely drawn a land. Maybe not from the Kings themselves, but from Glunch. Or maybe Glunch didn't draw us a land, but the Gay Kings got us. Glunch cleared that non-land off the top of our library so that the Gay Kings can draw us our next card, which is a land. You know, makes it easier. So yeah, very nice. That is Glunch. Next is Kellen Joins Up. This is a non-creature. We have 3 non-creature legendary spells in the deck, all of which help us out and can benefit from at least one of the cards in our deck that cares about our legendary spells. So for a green, a white, and a blue, we get a legendary enchantment that says when Kellen Joins Up enters, we may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from our hand, and if we do, it becomes plotted. Plotted means it's exiled face up, and on a later turn, we can cast it for free at its normal timing rules. So if we exile Path to Exile, let's say, we can cast that at sorcery speed. It's true that being plotted means only sorcery speed on our next turn, but we can do it for free. Otherwise, anything else we might have had in our hand, which oftentimes our hand is pretty full, and we have a lot of things mana value 3 or less in our deck, being able to cast it, we'd have to wait a turn to cast it, but we can do so for free, is sort of like saying we're going to pay 3 of its mana right now in the form of Kellen Joins Up in order to pay the entire, or to avoid paying the entirety of its cost next turn. Pretty neat. And we don't have to do it next turn. We can wait if we want to for whenever we might otherwise need to cast that spell. But yeah, being able to get something hopefully with a little bit of a discount, protecting it from any kind of hand attack our opponents might have, and otherwise get it out for free next turn seems pretty good. But when Kellen Joins Up is in play, it has another effect, which is whenever a legendary creature we control enters, we put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. Since this is an enters trigger, it will put that counter on the creature that entered as well. So this is just a repeatable way for us to get more and more counters across our entire board, the same way that Kynaios gives it to us, but it'll put counters on Mike as well, so nice. Next up, we have Kyril, Attentive First Year. This is another one of the new Strixhaven 5, or if you want to call them the new Lorwyn 5. It's really not either of those two, but it's the new 5 students that we saw first in Lorwyn and then are now in Strixhaven. So Kyril, Attentive First Year, is 1 and double Boros hybrid mana. So 1 and double red, 1 and double white, or 1 a red and a white. That gives us a 3/3 legendary vampire cleric with the ability that lets us tap 2 untapped creatures we control to copy target triggered ability we control. We can choose new targets for the copy and only once each turn. So what's nice about this is it doesn't require us to have these creatures to have them lack summoning sickness. We are tapping creatures, but we're not using anything that requires the tap symbol. So we can play out Kyril and go to our end step, let the Gay Kings trigger, and with that trigger on the stack, we can tap Kyril and the Gay Kings to copy that triggered ability. And so we get to do our draw a card, we can put a land into play, everyone else can either draw a card or put a land into play, and then we repeat that process once. We might do this for Halana and Alena's triggered ability. When we first go to combat, they get to put counters on one of our creatures equal to their power, and that creature gains haste. Maybe we choose a second target for that second ability, the copy that we make. Kyril can give us an awful lot in this deck because we are so full of great abilities that trigger on our other creatures. Now we can only use triggered abilities, not activated abilities like Kynaios' tap abilities, but we've got great triggered abilities all over the place, particularly in our commanders. So yeah, Kyril can help us out a lot in this deck. Next up is Kutzil Malamat Exemplar. 1 a green and a white for a 3/3 legendary cat warrior that says your opponents can't cast spells on your turn. So a little bit of protection from interaction that isn't like ability based. So yeah, we can't have our, we're not going to get blown out by a surprise removal spell on our turn at least. And whenever 1 or more creatures we control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So Kutzil is a great inclusion in any deck that involves counters or pump or anthems of that sort. So if we have, Kutzil itself, get a couple of counters from Halana and Alena. Kutzel attacks and does combat damage to a player. Its base power and toughness is 3/3, but it's going to be doing damage based on that power plus the counters it has. So that is power greater than its base power, and so we'll draw a card off of it. And that's one or more creatures, so any number of creatures we hit a player with is going to trigger Kutzel only once, but it does say to a player, which means if we send our creatures at multiple players, then we're going to get a trigger for each player who has been dealt damage by any number of our creatures with base power lower than the damage being dealt. So yeah, we can draw multiple cards off of Kutzel in the same turn. Usually we're only getting one if we're focusing our attack on one player, but still it can be pretty nice. Next up, we have Loot Exuberant Explorer. 2 and a green for a 1/4 legendary beast noble that gives us exploration. We can play an extra land on each of our turns. An amazing card for a deck that requires a lot of mana, but also draws a lot of cards. We can have our hand completely full of cards, and we can get 2 of them out, one with our regular land drop and one with our other land drop thanks to Loot. And Loot's got a pretty nice booty, being able to block very well, but we can also pay 4 and a green and tap Loot to look at the top 6 cards of our library, reveal a creature card, mana value less than or equal to the number of lands we control from among those cards we revealed, and we get to put it directly on the battlefield without having to cast it, and the rest go on the bottom in a random order. So since we have a pretty heavy creature count in this deck, we've got 39 creatures, Loot's going to be in play when this happens, and our commanders are not in our hands, or not in our library rather, but we can still find 36 different cards in the library and put any number of them probably into play, simply because most of our creatures cost less than the number of lands we're likely to have in play once we can activate a 6 mana activation cost. By this point, we've usually got more than 6 lands into play. So yeah, Loot can really help us accelerate our creatures out, can essentially dig into our library and find something powerful for us if we don't happen to have it in hand at the time, and at the very least, gives us a little more acceleration that works very well with the Gay Kings. Lauren of the Third Path is next, and she's my favorite Reclamation Sage. This is 2 and a white for a 2/1 legendary human artificer with vigilance that says when Lauren enters, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So she comes in and is just a little bit of removal for us on a stick, and that's pretty good. And then when she can have her abilities activated, when she no longer has Summoning Sickness, we can tap her, and we and another target opponent each draw a card. So a little bit more group hug for us. It's a guaranteed card draw every turn cycle for us. We can do it on our turn if we want to make sure we have, like I mentioned before, an extra card on hand so that when the Gay Kings trigger, we're more likely to be able to get a land to put into play. Or we can wait till the end step of our opponent to our right and draw an extra card right before our turn, so we untap with an extra card in hand. Or we can do this whenever we want to make a deal with an opponent and say, hey, look, if you and I are friends, if you're not coming after me over the course of this next turn cycle at least, I'll give you a card. And a lot of times people will take that because we're already helping them by giving them extra land drops and other extra cards. Lauren, notably, another creature with a great story. She links to her husband Felden's story. Not that his story is more important than hers, but Lauren, spoilers, does die earlier in the story, and then Felden his whole deal is like spending the rest of his life trying to bring her back somehow. I tell this story in my holiday deck, the Toy Maker, which is going to be linked in this video's description as well. It's the Felden of the Third Path deck. Truly love it. I really love that they brought Lauren back. Also, notably in this story, or this card, this is the Golgothian Silex. This is the magical artifact that Urza and Mishra end up fighting over, as do Ashnod and Tawnos, their lieutenants, during the story of the Brothers' War. It's what kills Mishra finally, sort of. It's what awakens Urza's Planeswalker Spark and sets so much of the history of all of Magic in motion. It's what begins the Ice Age on Dominaria. It recently came back, in a way, during a couple of years ago in the All Will Be One and March of the Machine story. Big fan of all of the lore that went into everything from the Brothers' War, especially with Lauren and her personal history and the Silex itself. So you can see there's a lot of stories here. I'm only mentioning a few of them as we go through. Rishkar, Pima Renegade, an important character from original Kaladesh block, is 2 and a green for a 2/2 legendary elf druid that when Rishkar enters, we get to put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. One of those creatures can be Rishkar, so this could be a 3/3 that puts a single counter on another creature. Either way, that's good. And each creature we control with a counter on it has tap to add a green mana. Green is our most represented color, so pretty nice. We get to make every creature with counters, which is many of our creatures in this deck, into a source of mana to play out even more creatures. Love it. Next up, we have one of our Selvalas. This is Selvala Explorer Returned. 1, a green and a white for a 2/4 legendary elf scout with a parlay ability. We can tap Selvala, and each player reveals the top card of their library, and for each non-land card revealed this way, we get a green mana in our pool, and we gain a life. And then everyone draws a card. So essentially, we're tapping Selvala, and everyone will reveal their top card and draw it, but we get a benefit for every spell that we get to see. That benefit being a life and a green mana. So a little bit of acceleration that we can use. Extra card in hand, an extra card in hand for everyone. We're being really nice to everyone here. So yeah, Selvala is very cool. And love the art for Selvala. What a cool, facial expression. Next up, we have Tenuk, Memorial Ensign. Great creature. Great character from the Edge of Eternity story. The other version of Tenuk, I have a commander deck for. It's also linked in the video's description. It's mono red warp. It's a lot of fun. But this one is also very cool, and it's great in our deck. For 1, a red and a green, we get a 2/4 legendary Kavu pilot with a landfall ability. Whenever a land we control enters, Tenuk deals 1 damage to each opponent, and if it's the second time this ability is resolved this turn, we also draw a card. So, what's the likelihood that we're going to be playing a lot of lands in this deck? Well, for one thing, we're running 40 lands in the deck, so we're a little higher than even our 38 sort of baseline that we normally stick to. But it's also the case that not only are we likely to play a land during our turn, but the Gate Kings give us a growth spiral at the end of our turn. So we have a good chance of getting 2 lands into play every turn via that ability. So every turn, we might be doing 2 damage to each opponent, 1 damage from Tenuk for each of our lands that go into play, and drawing another card at our end step beyond just the one we got from the Gate Kings. Tenuk can really help us out. And if we have something like Loot in play where we get even more land drops, seems good to me. Next, we have Trommel, Seymour's Butler. I am not a Final Fantasy guy, so I don't really know exactly who this person is from, I guess, Final Fantasy X. But they're a powerful card, and Final Fantasy's in Standard, so we can invite this guy to the barbecue. Why not? For 2 and a green, we've got a 2/3 legendary Elf Advisor that has each other non-token creature we control enter with an additional 1/1 counter on it. So this is a little bit like Arwen that we already saw, but it's only one 1/1 counter no matter what. However, we can pay 1 and tap Trommel and proliferate a number of times equal to the number of non-token creatures we control that entered this turn. Proliferate means we choose any number of permanents and or players and put an extra counter of each kind that's already on those permanents and players onto them. So if we have a creature that has a stun counter and a +1/+1 counter, and we choose to proliferate that creature, hopefully it's not our creature, then it's going to get 1 more counter of each kind. We cannot pick and choose the specific counters we want to proliferate, only the permanents and or players. So if there's a player that has experience counters and poison counters on them, we can certainly proliferate that player and they'll get 1 more of each. So yeah. So Trommel can be very powerful in our deck, especially when there are turns where we're chaining together a bunch of different creatures coming into play, even the non-tokens. Sometimes we can play 3 or 4 different creatures in the same turn and still have 1 more mana left over to proliferate, which we can wait till the end step to use so that we've already had our other triggers, like our combat trigger where Halana and Alena will put 2 counters on something. We can then proliferate those counters in addition to whatever other counters have been put on our things, like from Trommel's replacement effect. So yeah, this can be pretty nice for us because it's not proliferate on X things, it's proliferate X times. If we got 3 creatures in play and they all came in with a 1/1 counter on them, we activate Trommel's ability, we're going to proliferate 3 times, so each of those creatures is going to get an extra counter 3 times. Amazing. Next up is our other legendary enchantment. This is Annie Joins Up, also from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, just like Kellen Joins Up. This is 1, a red, a green, and a white, so it's almost the same cost as the Gate Kings, but generic mana instead of blue. And it says when Annie joins up, it deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. So it's a 4 mana removal spell. That's fine. 5 damage is nothing to sneeze at. It can take out a lot of creatures and most planeswalkers most of the time. So yeah, But most importantly, if a triggered ability of a legendary creature we control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. We have so many triggered abilities on our legendary creatures. Even if we just had Halana and Alena and Kynaios and Tiro of Molinos, then we would still get double triggers for both of them, and that's worth 4 mana as an investment. But all the other triggers that we can get, just very, very good with Annie Joins Up. Next we have Aragorn, King of Gondor. This is 1, a blue, a red, and a white, so again, very similar to the casting cost of our Gay Kings, except just not green. And Aragorn is a 4/4 legendary human noble with Vigilance and Lifelink. 4 mana 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink, already pretty solid, and when Aragorn enters, we become the Monarch. The Monarch is a great mechanic in Magic. This is what it means. There's 2 things you need to know about the Monarch. 1, the Monarch draws a card at the beginning of their end step. So if you have the designation Monarch at your end step, you're going to draw a card. Aragorn is going to make you the Monarch, so he's going to draw you a card at your end step. Notably, like I said before, you can stack that trigger to happen before the Gay Kings trigger, so you have more cards in hand when the Gay Kings let you put a land into play. Just something worth thinking about. The other thing to know about the Monarchy is if someone has an effect that says you become the Monarch, then they become the Monarch. The only other way to become the Monarch is to deal combat damage to the Monarch. So if you are not the Monarch, all you have to do is attack the person who is, do combat damage to them, and you become the Monarch. And since you did that while attacking, that means it's your turn, you're going to go to your end step and you're going to draw a card. It seems like a single card is not that much to fight over, but the Monarch is a great mechanic that encourages players to attack and thereby interact with each other because they want those extra cards. Now, our deck is passing cards out every turn with our Gay Kings, and in several other ways, like Lauren, and some of our other triggers like Glunch, you know? But Aragorn gives players a chance to get even more cards and to fight over the Monarchy. That sounds great. In addition, when Aragorn attacks, up to 1 target creature can't block this turn. So we have a little evasion there. And if we're the Monarch, creatures can't block this turn, which means our whole board is unblockable. And that can often mean if we are the Monarch and we're attacking, that means it's usually been 1 turn cycle since we became the Monarch and no one was able to take it from us, and now we attack and there's just nothing our opponent can do to stop us, and if our board is big enough, that might mean they are done. But more importantly, how do we attack with Aragorn when we're the Monarch if we didn't keep it for a turn cycle? Well, Halana and Alena puts 2 counters on a creature and gives that creature haste until end of turn. So we can play Aragorn while Halana and Alena are already in play, become the Monarch, go to combat, Halana and Alena puts 2 counters on Aragorn, making him a 6/6 Vigilance Lifelink, and then Aragorn can attack right away. We're the Monarch, so no one can block. We're going to gain 6 life off of Aragorn, we're going to do 6 damage, in addition to whatever other damage we do with all of our other creatures. And then we go to our end step and we draw a card. Aragorn can still block because he has Vigilance, so we don't have to worry about necessarily losing our Monarchy. But if we do, no big deal. It's also the case that, remember, the Gay Kings are a 2/8. They're an incredible blocker. We have several other good blockers in the deck, like Glunch or Loot. So yeah, Aragorn is very nice in this deck for giving us cards, giving us the ability to attack. Even just having 1 creature unable to block can sometimes change combat math pretty significantly. So yeah. Inga and Esika is next. This is a card I really truly love for a lot of reasons. I will link the video in the description of when I made an Inga and Esika deck. But I just really like these 2 characters from Kaldheim. Inga is a blind seer, just a prophetess that foretells the doom scars happening on Kaldheim. Esika is god of the tree being the World Tree, which is Kaldheim's version of Yggdrasil, or Yggdrasil, however you pronounce it, and like runs the Rainbow Bridge, which is their version of the Bifrost, which is this. And then we're in Esika's chariot, which has got these big fluffy Norwegian forest cat type of kitties driving it. This Wayne Reynolds art is so gorgeous. I'll just mention, Esika also looks like my favorite singer. So anyway, I'm a big fan of both of these creatures and this card as a whole. It did an awful lot of work for me at the March on the Sheen pre-release. just a huge fan of this card, and it works great in this deck. So I'm not just putting it in because it's a pet card. So Inga Nasika is a 4/4 for 4, 2 a green and a blue, that gives all of our other creatures vigilance and tap to add 1 mana of any color, but only for creature spells. So making all of our creatures into mana dorks is something that we've seen a little bit of already, like with Rishkar, but making them tap for any mana is incredibly strong, and they can only spend that mana on creature spells, but most of our spells are creature spells, so that's fine. Plus, it gives all of our creatures vigilance, which cannot be understated or overstated how good it is. Being able to attack with our 2/8 commander, or if we've put a couple of Halana and Alena counters on the Gay Kings, they are a 4/10 with vigilance, and then they can, after combat, tap for mana for creature spells. Amazing. And whenever we cast a creature spell, if we spent 3 or more mana on it that came from creatures themselves, we draw a card. So if we use this ability that Inga and Nasika give to all of our creatures, and we do that, we tap 3 of our creatures for mana, we spend that on a creature spell, then we have spent 3 or more mana from creatures to cast a creature spell, and we get to draw a card. That's not limited to once each turn either. So if we have creatures like Ruby, or creatures that are otherwise mana dorks, I think Ruby may be our only one, that counts toward Inga and Nasika. But yeah, just being able to get extra cards from essentially giving like a weird backward but useful version of Convoke to all of our creatures is very strong. In addition to the vigilance, yeah, this card absolutely overperforms every time I put it in a deck. Next up, we have Kolvori, God of Kinship. This is another Kaldheim card, but this is actually from Kaldheim. It is 2 and double green for a 2/4 legendary god that says as long as we control 3 or more legendary creatures, Kolvori gets +4/+2 and has vigilance. So very easy condition for us to hit in this deck since all of our non-token creatures are legendary. Making Kolvori into a 4 mana 6/6 vigilance, that's crazy. And we can pay 1 and a green and tap Kolvori to look at the top 6 cards of our library, reveal a legendary creature from among them, put it in our hand, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this costs 4 mana less than loot, but puts the creature in our hand, and the creature has to be legendary, but in our deck, that's the same as just any creature, basically. And loot does have that restriction of we can only put the card we choose into play if it has a mana value no greater than the number of lands we have. But Kolvori just says, no, just pay 2 to look at the top 6 and draw a creature, essentially. And we can just cast it ourselves later. So all of Kolvori is very powerful for us if we want to cast her for 4 mana. But we might not. We might say, Kolvori, you're very strong, but we need to ramp. Kolvori is one of the Kaldheim gods, so she is a modal double-faced card. Instead of casting her as Kolvori for 2 and double green, we can cast her as the Ringheart Crest for 1 and a green, which is a legendary artifact that says as it enters, we choose a creature type, and we can tap it for a green that we can only spend to cast creature spells of the chosen type or legendary creature spells. Now notably, every one of our creature spells is a legendary creature spell, so the Ringheart Crest is essentially a 2 mana untapped green mana rock that only taps for creature mana. That's incredibly strong. Now we do get to choose a creature type, and we can choose whichever type we want because it does not matter because all of our creatures are legendary. The most common creature type in our deck is of course human, but we can choose whatever we want. We can be a little silly about it. You can choose clown if you want to. It's a creature type. So yeah, the Ringheart Crest is something we want to play on turn 2 if we want to accelerate. And if it's already turn 4 and we have the mana to cast Kolvori, it's pretty solid for us to choose to do so. Yeah, very nice either way. Next we have Lenore, Autumn Sovereign. Lenore is the face commander from the Midnight Hunt Commander product that was a Humans Coven deck and was a lot of fun and sort of unfairly maligned. Like people said this deck is not much fun. I had a great time with it. I bought the precon. I still have it sleeved even to this day, many, many years later. So yeah, Lenore is 2, a green and a white for a 0/4 legendary human noble with Coven. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature we control, and then if we control 3 or more creatures with different powers, we draw a card. That's one of the reasons Lenore is a 0/4, because if we have a couple of 2/2s in play, and we play Lenore, we go to combat, we put a counter on one of the 2/2s. Now we have 3 different creatures with different powers, 0, 2, and 3, and so we get to draw a card. So Lenore is an additional card every turn. This is a beginning of combat trigger, so we can stack it with our commander Halana and Alena if we want to, and maybe we have a situation where we're putting this 1/1 counter on Lenore first and still getting to draw a card because maybe we didn't have anything else that was already a 1 power, or we still have some other 2s and 3s or whatever. But we can also stack it so that maybe Halana and Alena's counters go on something first, and then we put a counter on either that same creature or a different creature with Lenore, as long as when Lenore's ability is resolving, after we've put her counter on something, we have 3 or more creatures with different powers, we're going to get that card draw either way. But it doesn't have to be... We could have a situation where it's like, let's say we have a 6-power creature and a 4-power creature. This is what we'll do. We'll say we have Lenore, Halana, and Alena with no counters on them, and a 4-power creature. So what we can do is we can put Lenore's counter on Halana and Alena. We can put Lenore's counter on herself, rather, making us have powers 1, 2, and 4. We draw a card, and then Halana and Alena will put those 2 counters on... they'll put their 2 counters on Lenore, and now we have a 3-power, a 2-power, and a 4. This isn't working. You understand where I'm going. You can make it set up so that even after Lenore has resolved, we end up with a total of 3 creatures without different powers. We just needed them to have different powers when Lenore's ability resolves, even if after that Halana and Alena put counters on things and mess up that coven. You get it. All right, that's Lenore. Let's move on to Ovia, or I think it may be Ovia. I'm not sure about this character. Also from original Kaladesh block. Notably, Kaladesh is no longer called Kaladesh. It's now Avishkar, a much better name. But I'm just referring to the set and the block that it was part of. Anyway, Ovia, I think is correct. Automech Artisan is 3 and a green for a 1/2 human artificer. Legendary, of course. So a 1/2 for 4, but each creature that's attacking one of our opponents has trample. So this is, interestingly, a little bit of an additional politicking effect. It's a little bit group sluggy. It means all of our creatures have trample while they're attacking. It also means every one of our opponents who attacks someone other than us, their creatures have trample while they're attacking. Each creature that's attacking one of our opponents has trample. This is a very powerful effect that gives all of our creatures essentially trample all the time whenever it's relevant, and every opponent's creatures trample when they're attacking someone other than us, so it encourages them to attack someone other than us. We just have to remind them of this, like, hey, you can come at us if you want, but you've got a pretty big board, and if you don't attack us, all your creatures have trample. And they might say, oh, good point. Also, Ovia says for a single green and tap, we can put a creature or vehicle card from our hand onto the battlefield, and if we put an artifact onto the battlefield this way, we put 2 1/1 counters on it. So we don't have any vehicles in this deck, but we do have some artifact creatures, like Dyadrine. So we can get 2 extra counters on something, but more importantly, this is an Elvish Piper effect. We get to say, for green and tap, we get to put a creature directly onto the battlefield. So we're tapping 1 creature and paying a green. So if you want to think of Ovia as a mana dork, it's 2 mana to put any creature out. Now, we don't get any cast triggers off that, it's just entering the battlefield, but we do get enters triggers if those are in play. And in any case, we can power out our big creatures or our creatures that we may not have the exact right mana to cast if necessary. It could be the case that we are able to accelerate ourselves a little bit and get Ovia into play on turn 3. And then on turn 4, we look at our mana and we say we can't quite cast the Gay Kings yet. Luckily, Ovia says we don't have to. Now that would be true if the Gay Kings were in our hand. Sometimes it happens, they go back to our hand, they get bounced or something, but we might have some other spell that requires 3 different colors of mana or 4 different colors of mana that's in our hand that we just don't have the mana to fix quite yet. Ovia can help us with that. Next up, we have another Selvala. This is Selvala Eager Trailblazer from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Still interesting facial art. Really like this. And a huge elk. Look at this. So, for 2, a green, and a white, we get a 4/5 Legendary Elf Scout with Vigilance. 4/5 Vigilance for 5 is already good. That says whenever you cast a creature spell, just cast a creature spell. It doesn't have to be any particular kind. We make a 1/1 Outlaws of Thunder Junction Mercenary creature token. A red mercenary that has tap at sorcery speed, and target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So getting a free 1/1 whenever we cast a creature spell is already pretty nice, especially since we have effects like Inca and Asika that gives all of our creatures the ability to tap for any color of mana for creature spells. But we can also use these mercenaries for their own effect, which is a sorcery speed small pump, which isn't nothing. We can also tap Selvala and choose a color, and add 1 mana of that color for each different power among creatures you control. So a little bit of Lenore vibes going on here, but we count up all of our creatures with different powers, which again, we can use Lenore, or more usually, Halana and Alena, to change the powers of our creatures by putting those counters on things. We can also use these mercenary tokens to do that as well, so that we're sort of tapping them, and each one is changing the power of a different creature, and if it's adding a new power to the suite of powers that we have, it's sort of like it's adding an extra mana to Selvala's ability. So yeah, this is another big mana dork we can also attack with vigilantly. Very nice. Plus, makes a bunch of tokens for us that we can use to chump block. We can pump up our things with them. We can even attack with them. We're putting counters on them a lot of the time too. Next up is Shalai and Halar. This card is so good. This is a 3/3 legendary angel elf. Shalai and Halar, an angel and an elf. Also, where is Halar going? Like, it seems like they are mid-air in this, and Halar has like jumped off of Shalai's back and is just going to plummet to their doom. I'm not sure if that's what's going to happen, but yeah, this art has always given me questions. But I do love Shalai. Shalai's a favorite character of mine. This is 1, a red, a green, and a white. Again, for a 3/3 angel elf. It has flying and vigilance, and whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shalai and Halar deals that much damage to target opponent. So when Shalai and Halar is in play, if we trigger we go to combat, we trigger Halana and Alena, we put 2 counters on anything. Let's say it's on Shalai and Halar themselves. That's 2 counters going on a creature we control, so Shalai and Halar will do 2 damage to an opponent. Let's say we activate Kynaios when we have 4 other creatures in play. Kynaios puts a counter on each of those 4 creatures, so Shalai and Halar will trigger 4 times, doing 1 damage to an opponent each of those times. Putting counters on things is a big part of our deck, and it's repeatable, so Shalai and Halar is giving us more value than just our creatures getting bigger from those counters. It's giving us the ability to turn those counters into direct damage every time. What if we had 10 creatures in play when we activated Mike? Shalai and Halar is going to have 10 instances of 1 damage, and that's a direct 10 damage to our opponents. We can do it to any particular opponent, maybe the same opponent, which is 25% of their starting life total right there. This is not Magical Christmas Land. Shalai and Halar machine gunning opponents happens all the time when you see this deck. It's a lot of fun. Check out, again, the video's description for my Shalai and Halar deck. Just so you know, I built a deck for every single March of the Machine legend. The ones from the main set, from the Jumpstart product, from the pre-release promos, and all of the non-face commanders, of which Shalai and Halar is one. So yeah, take a look. I've got a lot of them. Next up, we have Shalai herself from original Dominaria. This is 3 and a white for a 3/4 legendary angel with flying that gives us, all of our planeswalkers, and all of our other creatures hexproof. So every creature and planeswalker we control other than Shalai, and ourselves, we all have hexproof. People can't target us. Beautiful, beautiful Shalai. Cannot let it happen. And for 4 and double green, so this same kind of effect cost that we've seen a couple of times, we can put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. If we happen to be in a situation where we've got a huge amount of mana, which is not unlikely in this deck, we can activate this multiple times on the same turn cycle. Maybe on an opponent's turn, since it doesn't say at sorcery speed. Shalai can make everything big while keeping everything safe. Love Shalai. Next up is Zamon, Paradox Sculptor. This is the Foundations version of Zamon. 2, a green and a blue for a 1/4 legendary human wizard that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. So it's kind of the same trigger as Halana and Alena, but rather than putting 2 counters on one creature, this is us putting 1 counter on up to 2 creatures. We cannot put both counters on the same creature, but we can spread them around, which is pretty nice for other effects we have in our deck. And also, unlike Shallan Halara, it doesn't give either of those creatures haste. But Zimone, for a green and blue and tap, can double the number of counters of each kind of counter on up to 2 target creatures and or artifacts we control. So Zimone, beginning of combat, puts 2 counters on creatures, one on one and one on another. Then we can tap Zimone for a green and a blue and tap and double those counters. So it's like we've done double what Halana and Alena have done by putting 1 counter on 2 creatures and then doubling those counters. If they already had counters, though, we're getting even more counters. And we can do this anytime we want. We can do it during combat to mess up combat math. We can do it during blocking. Notably, we can do this on creatures like Kynaios or like Dyadrine, who use counters in different ways to give ourselves even more counters than just sort of the incremental 1 up, 1 down sort of thing. Zimone doubling things is very powerful. Next we have Chulane, Teller of Tales. This is originally from the Brawl decks that were released in paper with Throne of Eldraine, my very favorite set, way back in 2019, when Wizards of the Coast was trying to get Brawl to be a thing in paper. So technically it still is, just I don't think anyone plays it. Chulane is easily the most powerful of those commanders. Also maybe the most boring of them. I know you're thinking, but isn't Korvold incredibly popular? Yes, Korvold is very popular because Korvold is also very powerful and is much more fun than Chulane. Chulane, like I say, just sort of a value engine, but is a very strong one in this deck and is a Teller of Tales, which is sort of the whole vibe of our deck. For 2, a green, a white, and a blue, we get a 2/4 legendary human druid with vigilance that says whenever you cast a creature spell, something we're doing all the time, we draw a card and then we can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. So this is Growth Spiral. It says every creature comes with a free Growth Spiral. Every one of our creature spells. What? That's so good. And Chulane has vigilance, so if we put a few counters on him, he can attack, he can block, he can already do that, but he can do it even more powerfully thanks to Halana and Alena. And he can protect our other creatures, because for 3 and tap, we can return target creature we control to its owner's hand. Doesn't even say another target creature, so we can do this on Chulane himself. And because he has vigilance, we're likely not to be tapping him for other things unless we have, Inga and Asika or Rishkar in play. So Chulane gives us a way to bounce, at the very least, Kynaios and Tiro of Miletus back to our hand so that we don't have to recast them as a 6 mana card. We're spending 3 mana right now to play it again for 4 mana, which I know is 7, but we can do that 3 mana on the turn before, or a turn that precedes the turn that we're replaying the Gate Kings. So yeah, this is a nice bounce effect that can save one of our creatures, can protect us from losing it to either exile or to a board wipe, to a destroy effect, to a tuck effect, or just keeping one of our commanders from having to be recast from the command zone with commander tax. Next up, we have Jeru and Hazaret. This is another March of the Machine commander, so of course, check the video's description for the deck I made for this card. It's a lot of fun, just really fun. This is just a really cool card. A little difficult to cast in our deck. 2 double red and a white, but not terrible. It's just red is one of our least present colors, so getting double red can sometimes be challenging. But usually by the time we can cast our 5 mana creature, we've probably gotten more lands into play than we have turns of the game. So we're usually doing fine for it. It could just be a little awkward sometimes. So for 5 mana, we get a 5/4 legendary human god. This is the human and this is the god, in case it wasn't clear. This says, as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, Jeru and Hazaret has vigilance and haste. This almost never comes up in this deck because we have so many cards in hand so much of the time. Although, sometimes later in the game, we can empty our hand because we have so much land in play. And when that happens, if we happen to draw Jeru and Hazaret, or have it be one of our last couple of cards in hand, we play them, they have vigilance and haste, we can swing in right away. And whenever Jeru and Hazoret attacks, we look at the top 6 cards of our library. Seeing a theme from some of the other cards we've seen before, we can exile a legendary creature card from among them and put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and until end of turn, we can cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So this is not quite the same as loot. It doesn't require us to activate or pay for it, it just needs us to attack with Jeru and Hazoret. We look at the top 6, we have to find a legendary creature, and we don't get to put it into play as part of the resolution of the ability the same way that loot does, but we also don't care if we had enough about our land count, since loot cares about the creature we put into play having no more mana than the number of lands we control. We just have to do this at normal timing restrictions. We can, until end of turn, cast it, but when we do, we don't have to pay its mana cost. So a nice way to get out another free creature. We do get the cast trigger and the enters trigger from both of this. It just doesn't cost us any mana. And this works even if Jeru and Hazoret doesn't stick around long enough to get to our second main phase when we do cast it. We just get that permission either way. Nice. Next we have God Eternal Oketra. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. God Eternal Oketra, this particular card comes from War of the Spark, which has years and years and years of machinations and story leading up to it, and it is the culmination. It was the first event set, I think they call it, that culminated with the end of this story of my favorite villain in Magic, Nicol Bolas, taking us all the way through, going to the things that he did in Alara and the things that he did in Amonkhet, which of course is where Oketra comes from. All the things he did in Ravnica, the influences he had with Ixalan, of course, thanks to the Immortal Sun, all the stuff on that Tezzeret did. Anyway, we won't go into the whole story, but this is a really cool moment that's happening right here with Oketra that I would love for you to look up. I didn't love the actual writing for the specifically War of the Spark stories that they published. That's its own whole thing. But the tale itself, wonderful. Just don't read the novels. So anyway, God Eternal Oketra is 3 and double white for a 3/6 legendary zombie god with double strike. Now I know you're thinking, isn't Oketra one of the same gods as Hazoret? And didn't we just see how freaking huge Hazoret is? Yes. So Oketra is enormous. She's a giant god and has a bow. So being a giant and being an archer should mean that Oketra has double strike, not reach. I have issues with enormous things, especially archers not having reach. Like, come on, why doesn't Nylea have reach? Anyway, let's move on. So a 5 mana 3/6 double strike, legendary zombie god, that says whenever you cast a creature spell, make a 4/4 black zombie warrior creature token with vigilance. So we get free 4/4 vigilant zombies every time we cast any creature spell. Good grief. Oketra gives us so much value. All of these creatures are ferocious, power 4 or greater, relevant for our Garruk's Uprising, which is later in the deck, and just essentially doubles all of our creatures that we cast after Oketra, because we get whatever creature we cast and this zombie. And 4/4 vigilance is nothing to sneeze at. In addition, a 3/6 double striker, what if it were bigger? How could it possibly be bigger though, unless we had a commander that puts 2 counters on a creature every combat? Like, God Eternal Oketra enters with Halana and Alena already in play. They go to combat, they put 2 counters on Oketra. Oketra is now a 5/8 double strike with haste, thanks to Halana and Alena, and we attack for 10 damage. Amazing. Anyway, it also says, when God Eternal Oketra dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, we may put it into its owner's library 3rd from the top. So if we don't want Oketra to be exiled forever or dead forever, we can just tuck her back into the top of the library and we'll get her back. We just get her back, no big deal. This includes things like being, obviously killed in combat, or being us being forced to sacrifice something, whatever it may be, or exile isn't just like a farewell or a directed exile effect. It could also be an Oblivion Ring effect or a Banishing Light that says exile this creature or exile target creature until this permanent leaves the battlefield. That's still exile, so we could take Oketra out from under that and just put her back 3rd from the top of our library. Great. Next up, we've got an actual god. I mentioned Nylea for a moment, but we've got another god from Theros. This is Karametra, god of harvests. A 6/7 legendary enchantment creature god for 3, a green, and a white. Karametra, like all Theros gods, or most of them I guess, is indestructible. And as long as our devotion to green and white is less than 7, Karametra isn't a creature. Now what is devotion? Devotion means you look at all the permanents you have in play, and you count up the colored pips in their casting costs, and that's your devotion. So green and white, we're looking for a total number of green plus white equal to 7. So if we had, let's say, these cards in play, these 8 cards, then our green devotion would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and our white devotion would be 8, 9, 10, so 3, so a total of 10. Urza's Ruinous Blast is a sorcery, so we're not counting that, but these 7 means even with just green, if we're looking at that, we've already got devotion with Karametra. So the way this works is, we're casting her as a creature spell, an enchantment creature spell, and she has this continuous effect that keeps her from being a creature, it just makes her a legendary enchantment, while we don't have that devotion. But once we have it, or if we have it when she enters, she's a 6/7 indestructible god. She's indestructible and a legendary enchantment no matter what. And also no matter what, she says whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So every time we cast any creature, we get a free rampant growth, but it's not even a rampant growth. It only works on plains and forests, but it doesn't say basic. So we get to find any of our dual-typed forests or dual-typed plains. And again, green and white are the most represented colors in our deck. So Karametra gives us the ability to find dual lands that are either a forest or a plains and whatever else we may need most in that moment. They come in tapped, but a lot of them might have anyway. And then once we run out of forests and plains that are dual lands, we just find our basics, of which we have several as well. Karametra can give us so much acceleration. In my testing of this deck, there have been times where I'm like, oh, it's turn 7 and I have 15 or 16 mana available to me. And that's not even counting, mana dorks like Bridget's Backside, or what's her name, Ruby. It's just lands in play. Amazing. Plus a 6/7 indestructible creature that we can put counters on and attack with. Just so much to say. Next up, we have another version of Loot. This is Loot from Aetherdrift. It's Loot the Pathfinder, a 2/4 legendary beast noble for 2, a green, a blue, and a red. So kind of restrictive mana, but we can make it happen. Because Loot has double strike, vigilance, and haste. We take Loot, we go to combat, we put 2 counters on Loot from Halana and Alena, and it's a 4/6 double strike with vigilance and haste. Halana and Alena would have given him haste anyway, but I guess he's already got it. And Loot has 3 exhaust abilities, which means we can activate these 3 abilities only once during the game. Unless Loot leaves the battlefield and returns somehow, because maybe he gets flickered, maybe he gets reanimated, maybe he gets bounced to our hand, something we can do with Chulane, for example, and then recast so we can do these again. While Loot is the same game object, we can only do each of these abilities once, but we can do all of them. However, there are ways, like I mentioned with Chulane, in this deck to loop Loot so that we can get these abilities again. So these 3 abilities are basically all the best charms from the charm cycle in Alpha. It's just that the green one is actually Dark Ritual. It's green and tap, add 3 mana of any color. So instead of black to add 3 black, it's green to add any color. So a little bit of acceleration for us, only once, but it's a big burst of it, and it's very nice. Remember, also notably, none of these exhaust abilities are at sorcery speed. Exhaust for a blue and tap is draw 3 cards. It's just Ancestral Recall on this body. In case we needed extra cards in this deck, Loot's got them for us. And the red one is Lightning Bolt. Red and tap, 3 damage to any target. Amazing. Being able to do these at instant speed, we can even do that on a turn that Loot attacked, because Loot has vigilance. Yeah, very, very powerful, especially in a deck where we're not really trying to loop Loot and to flicker it a whole lot of times. The ability to do these even just once each time on a reasonable body with good keywords that we can pump up from in a number of different ways, including something in our command zone. Yeah, Loot can really help us out. Next up, another just piece of value for us is Tatyova Benthic Druid. This is 3, a green, and a blue for a 3/3 legendary Merfolk Druid with landfall When a land you control enters, gain a life and draw a card. Great. This is going to happen from all the landfall we've talked about before when we were talking about Tanuk. Being able to gain a life and draw an extra card whenever we make a land drop, whether it's during our turn or when we get a land into play thanks to our Gay Kings at the end of our turn, Tatyova just keeps our hand full and gives us a little bit of life, which can be relevant to us as the game goes on. Next up, we have another Baldur's Gate legend. This is the Council of Four. 3 a white and a blue for a 0/8, so another incredibly good blocker. Human Noble, legendary Human Noble, that says whenever a player draws their second card during their turn, you draw a card. So notably, during our end step, we are going to draw a card thanks to Kynaios and Tiro, which is going to be our second card, and we are a player, so we're going to draw another card as well. This card is going to go into our hand after the resolution of Kynaios and Tiro's ability, but we still get an extra card after that growth spiral that we got from them. It also is, if anyone has drawn a second card on their turn, we also get to draw a card then as well. We're not really trying to give them the ability to do that, except in a few ways, like Lauren of the Third Path. We can tap her on someone else's turn, let them draw their second card, and we get to draw a card as well. And then we draw a card from the Council of Four. Nice. And whenever a player casts their second spell during their turn, which we are doing all the time, and it's only second for both of these, of course. It's not every other, but it's still second. But a lot of other players will do, especially when it comes to instants during combat, It's got to be during their turn, but if they cast 2 spells, we get a free 2/2 White Knight creature token. So the Council of Four is a great blocker. It's something we can make even a better blocker with our counters, and eventually a good attacker. It will draw us cards. It will make us knight creature tokens. Yeah, pretty solid. Next up is our last non-permanent legendary spell. This is 4 and a white for Urza's Ruinous Blast. Remember I was talking before about that Golgothian Silex pictured on Lauren of the Third Path? This is Urza using it to blow up Terracier. No, it's Argoth? Is Terracier the continent and Argoth is the forest? I'm getting it wrong. I know it's Argoth the forest, but it might be Argoth the island? Not sure. In any case, very powerful moment, very important moment, the culmination of the Brothers' War, pictured in this legendary sorcery. Legendary sorceries can only be cast if we control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Luckily, all of our creatures in our deck are legendary, so as long as we have any non-token creature from our deck in play, we're allowed to cast this spell. And what it does is it exiles all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So this means every player on the table gets to keep their commander. They get to keep any other legendary things that they have. Everything else is gone. And that includes us. So if we have enchantments that aren't legendary, if we have artifacts like a soul rings aren't legendary, we are going to lose some things. But we keep basically our entire board of creatures that are not tokens, and everyone else is losing their whole board except their commander a lot of the time. Now, that's less true these days as so many more legends are getting printed, but Urza's Ruinous Blast is such a classic card with a great story behind it. I truly think that, at time of recording, the Netflix series, we don't know what it's going to be about, if it even comes out for Magic the Gathering. But I think the very best story they could tell would be either the story of the Thrawn, or more importantly, the Brothers' War. That is the best story in Magic, even if it's not my favorite. My favorite is the story that led up to War of the Spark. And it would be so great to be able to see, like a several minute sequence of this happening and Urza becoming a planeswalker and the creature that Mishra had become, the Phyrexian sort of automaton, being destroyed forever, the Silex being lost, like getting to see Felden and Lauren way off, Felden particularly, and Lauren way off in the distance, seeing the explosion. Anyway, very cool moment. A great card for the story and for the telling of the stories at the table when you play this deck, and a good theme for what we're already building toward. Next up, we have Xeris, the Writhing Storm. It is Xeris, right? Xeris. Yeah, Xeris, the Writhing Storm. This is 2, a green, a blue, and a red for a 3/5 legendary Snake Leviathan. Big, scary monster. It flies. Why does it fly? Leviathans are sea monsters. Snakes are snakes. How many snakes fly? I guess Ice Fang Quaddle flies. Anyway, this is a 3/5 flyer that says whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, make a 1/1 green snake creature token. So this is incredibly strong in our deck. It means that during our end step, when the Gay Kings trigger, any of our opponents that choose not to put a land into play are going to choose to draw a card. And that's not the card that is the first one they draw on their draw step, so that we're going to get a snake for each one that does. Every opponent who draws a card in addition, beyond just that draw step, it doesn't even have to be only their second card draw. It could be their third or fourth or fifth, or drawing a card on any other player's turn. Every one of those draws makes us a snake. So this really populates our board with token creatures. They don't have Death Touch, but it's nice to have 1/1s that are just hanging out. And whenever Xeris deals combat damage to a player, we and that player each draw that many cards. That's 3 cards without Xeris having any kind of counters on it or any kind of pump on it. We can draw a lot of cards this way, so we get to have a little bit of like, look, if you let Xeris hit you, it's only 3 damage, and you get to draw 3 cards. Are you willing to draw 3, to pay 3 life to draw 3 cards? Most people are. I know it draws me those cards too. So this is a deal we can make with someone, even if not, if Xeris is not able to be blocked, or because maybe that player doesn't have any flyers or reachers, we can just swing in, do a little bit of damage, or maybe a lot of damage, thanks to all of our counters, especially the ones from Halana and Alena, and we can get a bunch of cards and mollify that player by saying, reminding them that they're getting cards too. So yeah, pretty nice stuff that we're doing here with Xeris. Works really well in the Kynaios and Tiro deck. Next up is Hamza, Guardian of Evasion, another really cool creature from originally Modern Horizons? Commander Legends, yeah, very cool. Hamza is a 4, a green, and a white. It's 4 and a green and a white, sorry, for a 5/5 legendary elephant warrior, part of the Abzan, I believe. I think part of the Abzan. That says it costs 1 generic less for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it. So we're not counting up the number of counters we have, we're counting the number of creatures we have that have counters on them. But a lot of the times, by the time we can get to the point that it's turn 6 or so, we're able to cast Hamza for maybe 4 mana, because we maybe have 2 triggers from Halana and Alena by that point already. We've gotten 2 different creatures that have gotten counters on them, both of which discount Hamza, but it could be the case that we get out Kynaios early on, and we're able to use them so that Hamza, by the time we can cast him, only costs us a green and a white. We can discount him all the way down to just that. And what's especially nice is Hamza gives all of our creature spells that same discount. Creature spells we cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it. So we do have a lot of creatures in this deck that have generic mana costs that are not super high. For example, like Xeris only has a generic mana cost of 2. Still is going to cost a green, a blue, and a red, even if Hamza is giving it like an 8 mana discount. The same is true of things like Loot, only 2 mana. But Karametra would get discounted by 3, so would Tatyova, so would the Council of 4, so would God Eternal Loketra, and so forth. So we're not getting huge discounts from Hamza on many of the creatures we're playing, but getting those discounts on every creature we're playing really can add up. Normally, I don't like to put discount effects in my deck at all unless I have a way for those discount effects to affect 40 of the spells in my deck, at least. But I do fudge that a little bit when the discount is more than a single mana. If it was just like an Emerald Medallion discounting all of our green spells by 1 generic, that wouldn't fit here. But Hamza discounts every one of our creature spells, of which we have quite a few, including Hamza itself and our commanders, and discounts them by more than 1. Even if most of our creature spells can only take advantage of 2 of that, it's still very strong. Now, notably, Kynaios and Tiro can't take advantage of this discount at all because Kynaios and Tiro does not have generic mana in its casting cost. But Halana and Alena do. We could discount them by 2 and get them into play for just a green and a red. Seems pretty good. So yeah, Hamza can do a lot for us. Usually this is a little bit of a feast or famine type effect, but it's fun in a deck that cares about counters, especially decks that are pretty pip intensive like this deck. We want to be able to make sure we have enough of the right kinds of colors to cast multiple spells in a turn. Hamza lets us do that by getting rid, essentially, or at least reducing the amount of generic mana we have to pay in addition. Next up Galta, Primal Hunger. Have you ever met Galta? Galta is a big friend. I think Galta is female. I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to use she, her pronouns for Galta during this. Galta is 10 and double green for a 12/12 legendary elder dinosaur with trample. So a 12/12 for 12 with trample feels right. It's expensive, but it feels right. But it's actually not expensive because it costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures we control. Not the greatest power among creatures we control, just the total power. As long as we have 10 power or more in play, among our creatures in play, Galta is a double green 12/12 trampling dinosaur. So Galta, in this deck, we can definitely power Galta out much faster, but we usually get her out, turn 5 or 6, and then we're putting counters on her and attacking with trample, and it's just delightful. What's especially nice is Galta is so simple. 12/12 trample is the only thing that's relevant once Galta's in play. And that's always relevant. So people are, other players are like, we got to kill Galta, even though Galta is nothing but stats and evasion. Stats and evasion, don't get me wrong, wins games, but it's not like a value engine like Tulane or even the Gay Kings, even Halana and Alena, which is putting counters on our things. It's still so intimidating. We just make it a 14/14 trample, go to town. An opponent's like, I've got to put 5 of my creatures in front of Galta in order to lose 4 or all of them, just so Galta doesn't kill me. And therefore Galta is a little bit of removal bait. So our better, more powerful creatures aren't getting removed. Just, love to see this lizard lady at our tables. And that is our Legends section. That is a whole bunch of cards. We're going to see all these cards again in different parts of the deck, but we have one other section in our game plan, which is our counters. These are all cards that, many of which we've seen, either put counters on our creatures or are creatures that help our other creatures come in with counters. So we've seen Mikaeus. Mikaeus can put a counter on each of our creatures or on himself. Bard class is next. This is our other discount effect, which is the big reason Bard class is in this deck, and it's a really cool card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. It's all about telling stories and entertaining people, which is kind of the vibe of the deck. Let's talk about this. So this is a class enchantment for a red and a green. Class enchantments come in with this first ability already available, and at sorcery speed, we can pay the cost of the level 2 ability to unlock level 2. We level it up, and now it has both abilities. Once it's level 2, at sorcery speed, we can pay the cost of the level 3 ability to level it up to level 3, and now it has the text of all 3 abilities. That's how these work. So when this first comes in, it says, legendary creatures we control enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them. That's why this card is in this section. It means all of our non-token creatures are going to come in with at least 1 extra 1/1 counter on them, thanks to Bard class. But the big benefit of Bard class comes at level 2. It says, once it's level 2, legendary spells we cast cost a red and a green less to cast, but it only reduces the amount of colored mana you pay. Which means, if we cast Bard class on turn 2, a red and a green, then on turn 3, we pay that red and a green again to level it up to level 2. If we have 2 of any mana, we can then cast Halana and Alena. Because Halana and Alena, with this discount, costs 2 generic mana, and that's all. Since it's discounted, its red and green pips are discounted by the Bard class. Kynaios and Tiro are also discounted by the red and the green, meaning it only costs a single white and blue to cast. So this affects an awful lot of the cards in our deck. But I know you're thinking, haven't we seen cards like Gotta Turn a Loketra? Don't we have legendary spells that are like mono white, or at least don't have any red or green pips, like the Council of Four? Yes, we do. There are, in this deck, 42 cards, I believe. Is it 42? I think it is. Let's take a look. So we've got our legends. There are 40 cards in this section, plus our 2 commanders. So that's 42 legendary cards. Back to our counter section. 42 legendary cards, but there are 7 of them that do not get a discount from Bard class's level 2 ability. So that takes us down to 35, which is too bad. However, there are also 7, I think there might actually be 8 now. There are 7 or 8 cards in our deck that get a discount of at least 2 mana from Bard class, because there are 7 or 8 cards that are both green and red, or have green and red pips in their casting cost. So while it's true that there are, out of 42 cards, 7 of them don't get a discount at all, 7 or 8 of them get a 2 mana discount. So I'm calling it a wash. So it ends up being about right. And it's just delightful to be able to say, like, oh, I have Bard class in play, and it's turn 4, and I have a white mana available, a blue mana available, and then 2 other of any kind. I can cast both of my commanders, because the Gay Kings only require the blue and the white, since Bard class is discounting the red and the green, and Halana and Alena only require 2 generic, since Bard class is discounting the red and the green. This can give us the ability, like what I was saying with Hamzan, to cast multiple spells in the same turn and to continually get more and more and more creatures into play and legends of that sort. So this is just a lot of fun. It's not hard to make it work when it works. Since the cost to level it up to level 2, we would have already paid and therefore already have been able to pay when we cast it the first time for level 1. And it just really does a lot of work for us. Even when we have to take a turn off of casting creatures just to level up our Bard class, this can really give us a lot of power, especially since, consider this. Let's say it's turn 4, we don't have Halana and Alena in play, but we do have 4 mana, and the Bard class is still at level 1. We can pay a red and a green to level it up to level 2, and that discounts Halana and Alena, so it's like we spent that mana on Halana and Alena. We just spent our other 2 mana to cast them out. So Bard class being able to discount things the same turn we level it up to level 2 is very strong. And I'll be honest with you, Bard class has a 3rd level for a 3, a red and a green, that I don't think we even really need in this deck. I think playing it and getting counters and leveling it up and getting a discount is an enormous amount of value. But maybe there is a time when we don't have enough cards in hand, and we just have so much mana that we're willing to level this up to level 3 and go ahead and use it. Which is, whenever you cast a legendary spell, exile the top 2 cards of your library, you may play them this turn. This is Impulse Draw. We don't get to do the thing that most Impulse Draw is printed with these days, where we get to hold it until the end of our next turn to cast it. So I often would say, I can spend this 5 mana on better places than this continual source of card advantage, because we have so much card advantage from other parts of our deck, particularly in our commander, Kynaios and Tiro, and their triggered ability. But, like I say, if you got mana to spend and you don't mind burning through your deck with this level 3 in order to get access to even more cards, sure, go for it. So that's Bard class. We've already seen Dyadrine. Dyadrine is in this section because Dyadrine comes in with counters on it, but cares about counters by letting us remove counters from our creatures in order to make robots and draw cards. Simic Ascendancy we haven't seen, though. This is a green and a blue for an enchantment that says, for 1, a green and a blue, we can put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control. That seems good, but it's the least relevant part of this card. It's just a nice mana sink for us to use to, at instant speed, put counters on our creatures. It also says whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on this enchantment. Growth counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by Simic Ascendancy for the next ability. But I want to make note of this. You only get a single growth counter for each instance of counters being put on a creature you control. It's only 1 growth counter for 1 or more 1/1 counters. However, you'll get this trigger for each creature you control, getting counters put on it. So if you have Kynaios trigger and put counters on 3 creatures, this ability will trigger 3 times. Even if Kynaios was somehow able to put 2 counters on each creature, this would still only trigger 3 times because it's any number of counters on a creature. So Kynaios putting a counter on 3 creatures gives us 3 growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. Halana and Alena triggering and putting 2 counters on one of our creatures triggers this once and puts 1 counter on Simic Ascendancy. But Zimone triggering and putting a counter on 2 different creatures, on each of 2 different creatures, that's going to trigger Simic Ascendancy twice because it's any number of counters being put on a creature and we're putting it on 2 creatures. So we get 2 growth counters. You see how it works. And of course we can trigger all that with its first ability by using it to put counters on things, which means counters being put on things, and so we're getting a growth counter. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if this enchantment has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. So this is an alternate victory condition, which is not usually going to be something we see. It requires us to get up to 20 or more growth counters, and this deck is a counters deck, but it's more of a Legends deck. In a dedicated Simic counters deck, you're going to be able to get to Simic Ascendancy having 20 growth counters much faster, but it's fine. It's a nice little benefit for us that can stick around and be something that is, again, removal bait for our opponents, because once it has 20 or more growth counters, we've still got to wait until the beginning of our upkeep for this to trigger. But if this triggers at the beginning of our upkeep and somebody removes it in response, it will use last known information to figure out if it had 20 or more growth counters on it, and we will still win. So yeah, pretty nice. Next up, we've seen Erdnan, pardon me, I'm never going to say this guy's name right. Erdnan comes in and puts a counter on a creature. Arwen makes sure all of our other creatures, non-token or otherwise, enter with a number of counters equal to Arwen's toughness. We haven't seen Broker's Ascendancy. This is a little bit like Kellen Joins Up. It's a green, a white, and a blue for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. We're not running any planeswalkers, so Broker's Ascendancy is just a virtue of loyalty, if you want to think of it that way. Just a free extra counter on all of our creatures at our end step, which, of course, each of those counters being put on a creature will trigger Simic Ascendancy separately. So yeah, a nice way to spread the counters out for us. Glunch, we've already seen. Glunch gives us the ability to put 2 counters on one of our creatures, or draw a card, or make 2 treasures, and other players are going to get to do the ones we didn't choose. Kellen Joins Up, puts a 1/1 counter on each of our creatures whenever we have a legendary creature enter. Rishkar comes in and puts a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Trommel has all of our non-token creatures enter with an extra 1/1 counter. Lenore lets us put a counter on something at the start of our combat, and then if we have Coven, we draw a card. Shalai lets us put a counter on all of our creatures if we pay 4 and double green. Zamone lets us put a counter on each of up to 2 target creatures we control at the start of every combat. And Hamza cares about counters too. Just gives us counters, gives us a discount based on the counters we have. So Hamza's in the deck for the same reason that Dyadrine, or in the section for the same reason Dyadrine is. So that covers all of our counter section. Oh hey, do you feel like maybe liking the video? I'm just kidding. You don't have to if you don't want to. I appreciate you sticking around with me and watching either way. Thank you for being here. So before we move on from our game plan to our supplemental sections, I want to cover these support sections as we usually do to see how we are propping up our game plan. We're going to start with our card advantage section, which as usual I've just tagged as draw. We've seen a lot of these already. There's a lot of draw in this deck. Again, not every card in the section actually does the draw card action. It just gives us access to other cards. For example, Bushwhack is a single green for a sorcery that says we can either look through our library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle, or target creature we control fights target creature we don't control. We either find a bush or we whack something. So this is not doing the draw card action, but it's quote-unquote drawing us a basic land, and that can be a great way, if we have the most represented color in our deck, for us to find a different color that we may need in our basics. Or it's a good little bit of removal. We've seen Bard Class. Bard Class gives us, with its last ability, the access to the top 2 cards of our library that we can play this turn every time we cast a legendary spell. Dyadrine lets us take counters off of our creatures in order to draw a card and make robots whenever we attack. Doesn't even have to be Dyadrine itself attacking. Herd Heirloom is 1 and a green for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, but we can only spend its mana to cast a creature spell. So sort of the same kind of mana that Inga and Asika lets our creatures tap for. Very nice. It's an untapped mana rock for just 2 mana. Makes any of our colors for our most prevalent creature type great. Or we can tap it, and until end of turn, target creature we control with power 4 or greater, so any of our ferocious creatures, gains trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So Ophidian, or Curiosity I like to call it. So this is very good. Trample gives us a greater chance of being able to do that combat damage to a player and draw a card. And we have plenty of creatures that either have power 4 or greater in our deck, or can get it when we pump them up with our counters, especially the ones that Halana and Alena pass out. It's especially nice if we were to have, say, one of those zombie warrior tokens that God Eternal Oketra makes, 4/4s with vigilance. We attack an opponent, they chump block with a 1/1 servo or something, and we, before combat damage, activate Herd Heirloom to give our 4/4 trample which causes our opponent not just to lose their little chump blocker, but also to take 3 damage, and we get to draw a card. But what if they were blocking with something like a 5/3, so that they know they're going to trade it with our creature, but at least they're not taking any damage? Well, we do the same trick. Right before damage, we activate the Herd Heirloom, give our creature trample. It's going to do 3 damage to that blocking creature and trample over for 1, so our opponent's taking 1 damage, and that means even though we've lost our creature, it has replaced itself because we drew a card. Lots of good can come of this second ability, and every turn we're not using the Herd Heirloom for this, we can use it for mana to get out even more creatures to use the second ability with later. Great. Hunter's Talent is next. This is another class enchantment for 1 and a green. Level 1 is when it enters, target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to target creature we don't control. So it's just Rabid Bite at sorcery speed. That's pretty solid. We can level it up to level 2 for 1 and a green, and when we do, whenever we attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. So we get a little bit of pump, a little bit of evasion on any one of our attacking creatures. That seems good. And level 3 is 3 and a green, and at the beginning of our end step, if we control a creature power 4 or greater, so just like I mentioned with the Herd Heirloom, not hard for us to do, we draw a card. So a additional end step trigger that draws us a card, again, we would want to stack this in such a way so that this resolves before Kynaios and Tiro's ability resolves, so that we're able to have more cards in hand when it's time to put land into play with Kynaios and Tiro's ability. So yeah, Hunter's Talent can give us repeatable card draw, a little bit of removal, good evasion, and even a little bit of pump in the process. Garruk's Uprising is a classic, love it. You don't have to run the Wiles of Eldraine Enchanting Tales printing, but I love them, so yeah. This is 2 and a green for an enchantment that does 3 things. One is it gives all of our creatures trample all the time, just constant trample. That's great. It also says when it enters, if we have a ferocious creature, a creature power 4 or greater, we draw a card. So it replaces itself as long as it comes in and sees a big creature we already have in play. But what if we play those big creatures after Garruk's Uprising is in play? Well, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters, we draw a card. So we do have a number of creatures that are not power 4 or greater, but then we make them bigger power using our counters, especially from Halana and Alena. So typically we would love, if we can, to have that already be the case once Garruk's Uprising comes in, so that we can draw a card and have it replace itself. But even if not, we have things like those zombie warriors I just mentioned from God Eternal Oketra, and every time they come in, we're drawing cards as well. So yeah, pretty good. And that constant trample is nothing to sneeze at either. Glunch can draw us a card, or put counters on things, or make treasures. Kutzil draws us a card every time one or more of our creatures deal combat damage to a player if any of those creatures have power greater than their base power. Loot doesn't draw us a card exactly, but can let us look at the top 6 and put a creature mana value less than or equal to the number of lands we control directly into play, so that's like new cards. Lauren lets us and target opponent draw a card when we tap her. Silvala lets everyone draw a card when we parlay with her, and also adds green mana to our pool and life to our life total, assuming any of those cards that were revealed, including our own, were non-lands. Tannock can draw us a card the second time his landfall trigger resolves during our turn. Aragorn makes us the Monarch, so at the very least, that same turn Aragorn comes in, at the end step, we're going to draw for the Monarch, so Aragorn replaces himself. Inga Nasika lets us draw a card every time we cast a creature spell using at least 3 mana that we got from creatures. Kolvori, much like Loot, lets us pay 1 and a green, tap and look at the top 6 cards of our library, and put a legendary creature from among them into our hand. Lenore draws us a card if after we've used her Coven trigger to put a 1/1 counter on one of our creatures, we have Coven, 3 or more creatures with different powers. Chulane draws us a card and lets us put a land into play from our hand every time we cast a creature spell, free Growth Spiral. Jeru and Hazaret attacks, lets us look at the top 6, and we can exile a legendary creature that we're able to, later that turn, cast without paying its mana cost. And that's pretty sweet. Loot can let us Ancestral Recall. That's just crazy. I hate to just laugh about it, but man, that's just so powerful. Tatyova draws us a card and gains us a life every time we have a land enter. The Council of 4 draws us a card every time a player draws their second card during their turn, including us. And Xeris draws us a card draws us a number of cards equal to the amount of combat damage it does to a player whenever it does that damage, and also has the player we dealt the damage to draw that same number of cards. And that is our card advantage section. We're going to talk about acceleration now, which as usual I've just tagged as ramp. Of course we're running Soul Ring. This is a single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. We've got a little bit of a mana intensive deck, and even though it is pip intensive, the benefit we get from acceleration from Soul Ring cannot be understated. It's so strong. Any little bit of research into the stats behind how powerful Soul Ring is will tell you there's almost no deck that doesn't benefit from it. Put it in your deck. We're also running Arcane Signet, 2 generic for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So this makes white, blue, red, or green in our deck. An untapped 2 mana rock that makes all of our colors. Of course we're running this. Farseek helps us out as well. This is 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Notably, this does not say a basic land. Now, we can't find any swamps in this deck, but we have plenty of mountains, islands, and plains, so many of which are dual typed, so we might be able to find a mountain island or a plains forest. It comes in tapped anyway, but we're fixing our mana for whatever colors we may need with Farseek, and it's great. Now, we're not running Nature's Lore as well. This is our only sort of rampant growth type of effect. The reason being, Nature's Lore finds us a forest, comes in untapped, but most of our dual lands in this deck would come in tapped anyway, because it's a bit of a budget land base. If you're going to upgrade your land base, you might want to put Nature's Lore in place of Farseek or in addition to Farseek. But we have so much acceleration in this deck that in my testing, Farseek has been a less expensive monetarily version of Nature's Lore that works just as well for us. We're playing Felwar Stone, of course we are. Much like Arcane Signet, this is a 2 mana untapped rock that taps for mana, but it makes 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Meaning, if the only thing we're facing is opponents that are running colorless decks or mono black decks, then yes, all this does is be an untapped 2 mana rock that produces mana we can spend on generic costs, which is still fine. That's Mind Stone. That's a Mind Stone we can't tap for, we can't sack to draw a card from, but still solid. If anyone's playing green, the most played color in Commander, then we suddenly have an untapped rock that makes the color that's most prevalent in our deck. And any kind of large pod or sort of colorfully diverse pod, Felwar Stone is essentially another Arcane Signet for us. Great. We've seen the Herd Heirloom. It can tap for 1 mana of any color for creature spells. Ruby can tap for red or green and has haste, so she's almost a 2 mana rock herself. Bridget's Backside, Doan's Mind, lets us tap for an amount of green or white mana equal to the number of creatures we control. It's other creatures, technically. So I did misspeak a little bit earlier about that. I do want to make mention. Bridget comes in, makes that Kithkin, and then we'll only tap for 1 on the backside. So at least that's 1, which is what we spent to flip Bridget to the backside in the first place. So yeah, worth mentioning though, I did mess it up the first time. She only counts the total number of other creatures we have, just so you know. I can't wait for the comments who are commenting after my first use, or my first description of Bridget, and not seeing this one. But that's fine, that's fair. I did screw it up, so yeah. Anyway, Glunch is next. Glunch can make treasure tokens. That can ramp us. Loot gives us an extra land drop every turn. That's not nothing in a deck with so much card advantage and so many lands in it. Relic of Legends does so much work in this deck. This is 3 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, so it's a manalith. But also, if we tap an untapped legendary creature we control, we can add 1 mana of any color. So this is not the same as Inga and Asika, which gives our creatures a tap ability to make mana that only can be spent on creature spells. This is an ability that Relic of Legends has, but it requires us to tap legendary creatures for it. But the way we look at it, it might as well be a tap ability on all of our creatures, because as long as the Relic is in play, all of our legendary creatures can tap for mana of any color, and that mana is unrestricted. We don't have to spend it on a particular kind of spell, like creature spells or legendary spells or anything like that. This turns all of our creatures, even the legendary creatures that have summoning sickness, into sources of mana for us. It cannot be overstated how powerful this card is in decks full of legends, especially one like ours, which only has non-legendary creatures in the form of tokens. Every creature spell in our deck is legendary. We've seen Rishkar. Rishkar can link all of our creatures with counters on them, tap for green. Selvala parlays and can make some green mana for us. It's unreliable, but it's a possibility. Inga Nasika, like I just described, gives all of our creatures vigilance and the ability to tap for mana that we can only spend on creatures. Kovori doesn't give us any kind of ramp unless we play her backside as the Ringheart Crest, which is tapped, or a 2-mana rock that taps for green mana that we can spend on any of our creature spells that are legendary, or any creature spell of the chosen type, whatever type that may be. Ovia doesn't ramp us, except that she can Elvish Pipe or something out. We can pay a green and tap her and just put a creature into play. So we're not casting that spell, but we are getting the creature into play without having to pay mana for it other than that one. Selvala lets us tap her for an amount of mana equal to the number of different powers among creatures we control. Shulane gives us a growth spiral every time we cast a creature spell, letting us draw a card and put a land into play. Doesn't even say tapped. Karametra, every time we cast a creature spell, lets us tutor for a forest or plains, basic or otherwise, and put it on the battlefield tapped. And of course, we can exhaust loot for a single green and tap to make 3 mana of any one color. Nice. That is our acceleration section, but we do have this discount section. I just want to call these 2 cards out since we've already talked about them. Bard class at level 2 can discount all of our legendary spells by a red and a green, but only the colored mana. So Bard class would discount Hamza by just the green, leaving his cost 4 and a white. And Hamza discounts all of our creature spells by an amount of generic mana equal to the number of creatures we control with 1/1 counters on them. Both solid inclusions and help us get out our big, expensive, color-intense cards. So that is our discount section. We're going to talk now about interaction, which as usual I've tagged as removal. So Bushwhack, as we've seen, can have one of our creatures fight another creature. We're running Lightning Bolt because we have a red deck, and Lightning Bolt goes in basically every red deck. It's a single red for an instant that does 3 damage to any target. It's not just something that loot can do for us. This is an incredible, efficient charm. Instant speed, 3 damage. We can burn our opponent's faces with this if we want to. Yeah, if you're running red, your deck should have a Lightning Bolt in it. I know it doesn't seem like exciting because everyone knows Lightning Bolt, but it's exciting because everyone knows Lightning Bolt. That's why they know it. We are also, for similar reasons, running Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. I like to say that these are almost exactly the same card. They're both a single white mana for an instant speed spell that can exile a target creature and give that creature's controller a little bit of a kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile gives that creature's controller the ability to rampant growth. They search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So both of these are single mana, instant speed, unconditional exile effects. It doesn't matter what their controller gets for it. It matters that we got rid of the thing we needed to get rid of, and we did it whenever we wanted to for only 1 mana. Put these in your deck. Hunter's Talent, as we've seen, its first level is just a Rabid Bite at sorcery speed, so that's pretty good. All right, you ready for my speech? Emergency Eject is underplayed in Commander. I often say, if you're the kind of person who, in white, wants to spend 2 and a white at instant speed to get rid of something, you're usually running Generous Gift, which destroys a permanent and gives that permanent's controller a 3/3 green elephant creature token. But at the kind of pods that my decks normally get played at, this kind of power level of a deck, those tables aren't really looking for an experience where they lose their lands. Like, it's just not something people want. So the ability of Generous Gift to destroy lands isn't something you want to have. And we'll talk more about this when we get to the land base, but if you're not running Generous Gift to blow up lands, then you shouldn't be running Generous Gift at all, because for the same cost, 2 and a white, you can have Stroke of Midnight, which is 2 and a white for an instant that destroys a non-land permanent and gives that creature's controller, or that permanent's controller, a 1/1 human creature token. So they get a 1/1 rather than a 3/3 that they would have gotten from Generous Gift. To which I say, why give them a creature at all when Emergency Eject exists? This is the same cost, 2 and a white, still an instant, and it still destroys any non-land permanent. So if we're not trying to kill lands anyway, why give them a 3/3 that can block, or even a 1/1 that can block, when we could give them a lander token instead? Lander tokens are Wayfarer's Baubles. They are artifact tokens that if they pay 2, tap and sack them, they get to rampant growth. So yes, for 2 mana more than Path to Exile. We're not exiling, we are destroying any non-land permanent rather than a creature. And Path to Exile gives them the Rampant Growth for free. Emergency Eject gives them a lander token that they have to pay to Rampant Growth. So we're paying 2 more mana, but so are they for their little kickback. Now, I'm not saying Emergency Eject is as good as Path to Exile, not at all. But you see where I'm coming from. If you're spending 3 mana for a sort of flexible removal spell, and you're not planning to hit lands with it anyway, I think Emergency Eject is the thing everyone should be running for this. And lander tokens are just fun, so yeah. Anyway, next up is Imprisoned in the Moon. This is 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker, and makes that permanent into a colorless land with tap to add a single generic mana, and causes that permanent to lose all other card types and abilities. So this is a removal effect, an interaction effect, that can turn off problematic lands. That's true. Maybe they've got like a bounce land, like an Azorius Chancery, that's making 2 mana every turn for them, and we make it into a land that only taps for a single colorless. Or they have a problematic planeswalker that we want to make and give them just a land sort of in response to, in that same sort of way that Emergency Eject or Path to Exile does, gives them access to a mana source rather than what they had. But really, Imprisoned in the Moon is meant to get rid of creatures. Because if you get rid of their biggest, scariest creature, or more relevantly, their commander, then unless they have a way to stop Imprisoned in the Moon from resolving, or a way to interact with their own lands, then they need to look for a way to destroy an enchantment, or an opponent, or make a deal with an opponent who's got a naturalize or a disenchant effect, or their commander is locked down for the rest of the game as a land. Unless they can interact with Imprisoned in the Moon, maybe because they have their own copy of Emergency Eject, their commander is locked down forever. And so this is one of my favorite ways to get rid of a commander without it being so punishing, like an Oubliette, for example, that opponent feels like they have no way of getting it back. At the very least, they get something back from it, which is the ability to tap for some mana. That's okay. So yeah, Imprisoned in the Moon is a solid removal spell for this. We've already seen Annie Joins Up. Annie Joins Up enters and does 5 damage to a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. We've seen Loot, which for a red and tap can do 3 damage to any target, so lightning bolt something. The last card we haven't seen is Banish to Another Universe. This is from the Doctor Who set. 4 and a white for an enchantment with affinity for historic permanence, meaning this costs a single generic mana less to cast for each artifact we control, each legend we control, and each saga we control. We don't have any sagas in this deck. And we have a few artifacts, but we've got an awful lot of legends. Every one of our legends, except for Urza's Ruinous Blast, is a permanent. So Banished to Another Universe is very rarely going to cost more than a single white mana. It's an enchantment, and when it comes in, we exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. It's a Banishing Light or an Oblivion Ring, but it hits any non-land permanent, and again, it gets discounted for all of our historic permanents, of which our deck mostly is. So that covers our interaction section. It's time now for our Wraths, of which we only have one. We've already seen it. I just mentioned it again. It's Urza's Ruinous Blast. This takes care of all the non-land permanents in play that aren't legendary, exiles them, helps us out more than everyone else, or hurts us less, I guess, than most of everyone else, since we're playing a Legends deck. So yeah, there you go. And that covers our support sections of the deck. We're going to talk about all of our supplemental sections, starting now with Simic Ascendancy. It's the one deck, or the one card I have tagged as a Wincon. I like to put this tag on cards that are meant to give us an alternate victory condition, which of course Simic Ascendancy can do if we get 20 or more growth counters on it and untap with it. So there we go. That is our Wincon section. Let's talk about our payoffs now. These are all cards that give us a reward for doing what we were going to do anyway, and we've seen them all. Bard class rewards us for casting legendary spells, giving us, at level 3, 2 cards in exile from the top of our library that we can play this turn. Also gives us extra counters when our legends enter. Simic Ascendancy rewards us whenever we put 1 or more 1/1 counters on a creature we control by getting growth counters. Kolvori is rewarding us by becoming a 6/6 Vigilance as long as we have 3 or more legendary creatures, which of course includes Kolvori herself. Selvala rewards us whenever we cast any creature spells by giving us a Mercenary. Halana and Halar gives us direct damage to opponents whenever we put one or more counters on a creature we control. Banish to Another Universe has affinity for historic permanence, so we're getting it out faster the more of our legends are in play. Chulane gives us a free growth spiral every time we cast a creature spell. God Eternal Ketra gives us a 4/4 black zombie warrior with vigilance every time we cast a creature spell. Karametra, every time we cast a creature spell, lets us tutor a forest or plains onto the battlefield tapped. They don't even have to be basic. The Council of Four gives us an extra card every time any player draws their second card, which we're going to be doing anyway, or a 2/2 White Knight every time any player casts their second spell, which again, we're going to be doing a lot. And Xerus gives us a snake every time any opponent draws a card, except for the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, and we have several different ways, including with Kynaios and Tiro, to have our opponents draw cards. So there you go. That is our payoff section. We have a little bit of synergy. These are cards that sort of give us help with the things we're already doing. Dyadrine can use the counters we're putting on all of our creatures by removing them when we attack, one counter from each of two different creatures, to draw us a card to make us a robot. Kirill can copy a triggered ability we control by just tapping two of our creatures, and we've got a lot of creatures in this deck, and Any Joins Up doubles the triggered abilities of our legends every time they trigger. That's our synergy section. So let's talk now about evasion. These are all the ways that we have to get past our opponent's stuff. Herd Heirloom can give one of our creatures power 4 or greater, trample, and curiosity until end of turn. Hunter's Talent can give one of our attacking creatures +1/+0 and trample with level 2. Garruk's Uprising gives all of our creatures trample. Ovaya also gives all of our creatures that are attacking one of our opponents trample, which is all of our creatures that aren't attacking a battle or planeswalker, as well as every creature our opponents control that's attacking another one of our opponents. And Aragorn makes it so when Aragorn attacks, one target creature can't block, and if we're the monarch, no creatures can block. So that's even the best kind of evasion. So that covers the evasion section. We next have a pump section. These are just a couple of cards that we have that can make our creatures a little bigger without using counters. If we sacrifice Hajar, all of our legendary creatures get indestructible and +1/+0. Hunter's Talents level 2 gives one of our attacking creatures +1/+0 and trample, and Jor-El can be activated to give all of our creatures base power and toughness equal to the number of cards in our hand, which oftentimes is a nice form of pump, with our hands being as big as they are in this deck. So that is the pump section. We next have protection. These are how we protect our creatures and ourselves. Hajar, as we've just seen, can give all of our legendary creatures indestructible. Tam, just by being in play, gives each other creature we control hexproof from each of its colors, and we can tap her to make one of our creatures all colors until end of turn. Kutzil protects us, in a way, by making it so our opponents can't cast spells during our turn. Shalai protects us more directly by giving us hexproof, as well as all of our other creatures and our planeswalkers, which we don't have, but we've got other creatures, and all of those get hexproof. And Chulane can protect our creatures by giving us the ability to bounce them, so that we don't just get to rebuy them, we also get to put them back in our hand, so that we don't have to pay a commander tax, we don't have to try and reanimate them, and so forth. That is our protection section. Next, we have a little bit of burn in the deck. These are just cards that we can use to do direct damage. Of course, Lightning Bolt does 3 damage to any target, so we can do that directly. Luth the Pathfinder has Lightning Bolt built into him, so the same thing is true there. Tannock does 1 damage to each opponent every time we have land enter, and if we happen to have our second land enter on the same turn, we also, in addition to that damage, draw a card. And Shalai Halar does direct damage to a target opponent every time we have counters put on creatures we control, equal to the number of counters that we put. Great. That covers our burn section. I want to look at all the ways we have to make tokens in this deck. We've seen them all, of course, but Dyadrine can make us a robot token when, after we attack, we remove a 1/1 counter from each of 2 creatures we control, in addition to drawing us a card. Jor-El gives us a 2/2 cat every time we draw our second card each turn, so usually every turn. Every time Bridget enters or transforms into the front side of Bridget, we get a 1/1 Kithkin. Selvala gives us a 1/1 red mercenary creature token every time we cast a creature spell. God Eternal Ketra gives us a vigilant 4/4 zombie warrior every time we cast a creature spell. The Council of Four gives us a 2/2 knight every time any player casts their second spell during their turn. And Xerus gives us a 1/1 snake every time any opponent draws any cards, with the exception of the first card they draw on each of their draw steps. Wow, that's a lot of snakes. And that's our tokens, and that covers every section in our deck of our spells. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with our basics. We're running Foundations Basics, because I mentioned how foundational this kind of deck is to Magic. With all Rebecca Gay art, for obvious reasons, because it's gorgeous. We're mostly green. We have a little bit more white than blue and red. And I know that proportionally, I could probably run fewer islands and especially mountains in this deck. I could even go down to 0 for either of these, and we would still be totally covered when it comes to our color balance. But because of the ability to fetch lands and the need to cover our bases in terms of getting the right colors we have in play in this 4-color deck, I almost always have a floor of 2 basics of every type of the colors represented in my deck, just because I don't want to accidentally have, one of my mountains milled, and I'm desperate to find another one, so I Farseek for it, and I only had one in the deck. So that kind of thing. Or if someone hits me with like a demolition field or a field of ruin, I want to be able to find the basic I most need, so running a minimum of 2 of each is fine, and this balance ends up working out totally fine for us in this deck. We are running all 6 check lands. Check lands are dual lands that tap for 1 of 2 colors and come in tapped unless we control one of the basic typed lands that match those colors. So Rootbound Crag comes in tapped unless we control a mountain or forest, and it taps for red or green. Notably, however, it does not say basic. So we can find a dual typed land, maybe like a mountain island, and Rootbound Crag will still come in tapped if we control that island mountain, because it is a mountain. So yeah, these end up working out quite well in 3-color decks, and they work out well in this deck as well, and are quite inexpensive. $1.50 for the entire 6 set. If you wanted to upgrade these, I might say the slow lands are a good idea. We've gotten half of them at time of recording reprinted into Secrets of Strixhaven. I bet we're going to get the other half in Reality Fracture later this year. But these are still much less expensive than what those are going for, and work totally fine in our deck. Remember, we are running 12 basic lands, but we've got a lot more non-basics that also have basic types. So after our check lands, here are our 5 fixing lands. Of course, we're running Command Tower. This is an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, just like Arcane Signet. So it's an untapped quad land. Obviously, we're running this in our deck. We would run this if this was a tapped quad land, like Path of Ancestry. This is a land that enters tapped and has the same text as Command Tower or Arcane Signet. But in addition, when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. So obviously, both of our commanders share creature types with themselves, so that's 2 cards right there. That'll give us the scry with Path of Ancestry. We also have 14 other humans in the deck, so a total of 16 of our cards in this deck, which is to say a sixth of the deck, will give us a scry with Path of Ancestry. We don't have any other cards that are rangers or soldiers that aren't also humans, but yeah, that's still quite a few cards. And even if we had nothing that this would get other than our commanders, it's a 4-color deck. A land that taps for all 4 colors, even if it comes in tapped, totally worth running. Similarly is our Exotic Orchard. This is an untapped land, and if Command Tower is the land version of Arcane Signet, this is the land version of Felwar Stone. It taps for 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So really nice for us, depending on how many colors our opponents are running. If an opponent has a Chromatic Lantern that makes all their lands tap for any color, Exotic Orchard can tap for any color. Same is true of Felwar Stone. Also interesting, if an opponent has an Exotic Orchard of their own, their orchard sees our other lands. So if we have all of our colors, their orchard makes all of our colors, and our orchard sees their orchard, which means our orchard makes all of our colors as well. Pretty neat. We're running Blighted Woodland. This would be a fine cut if you don't think you need this. I have not needed it during my brewing of the deck, but I like to have a fetch in the land base that can find my basics if I need to, even if it's a little slow. Blighted Woodland comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and a green, tap and sack it to Explosive Vegetation. Search for 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is a little slow. It requires us to pay for, tap, and sack this in order to get those 2 basics, but we can find 2 different colored lands, which Myriad Landscape, the kind of closest approximation to this, cannot do, and it lets us fix our mana. In addition to coming in untapped itself, so we're not missing out on mana the turn it comes down. Now, if this is our 4th land, It does mean we're not, thanks to colorless mana, able to cast our Kynaios and Tiro commander right away, but giving us the ability to accelerate when we have a lot of mana and get some of the basics out of our deck in the process is pretty nice with Blighted Woodland. It's a good option for us. It is 2 lands in play for a single land drop. Similarly, kind of, is Temple of the False God. Not everyone's favorite land, but it's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana. We just can't activate it at all unless we have at least 4 other lands in play, so 5 or more including itself. So this is a soul land. It makes Soul Ring mana. We just don't get any acceleration from it early game, which admittedly is the time you want your acceleration most. But in a deck like this, where it's so easy for us to get multiple lands in play, where our commander has a free growth spiral at each of our end steps, one of our commanders does, in addition to us having other ways to put additional lands in play or make additional land drops and to draw so many cards to take advantage of those, Temple of the False God can be making an extra 2 mana for us super early in the game. And since we have plenty of spells that do cost more than a couple of mana, even though they might be color intensive, Temple of the False God can do a lot of work for us, even mid-game and late game. And it comes online faster than you sometimes think it would. Also, I do want to make mention, there's a big statue in the art here. And if you look at Kynaios and Tiro's art, there's 2 big statues of the 2 of them guarding Meletus. So that's kind of a neat thematic connection. So that's our fixing lands section. We are running all 6 pain lands in our colors. I didn't want to run the pain lands in this. I wanted to do things that were either more basics or more typed duels, but the pain lands work so well for us in this deck, and we do have a little bit of incidental life gain, like Tatyova, that it can sometimes offset the damage we take from these lands. We'll look at Yavimaya as the example. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless. It also taps for green or green or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. The way I normally like to talk about these, or the talismans, which are the artifact version of them, is that it's always appropriate to let it do a damage to you. Because imagine you were playing a spell and you had a little bit of mana left, but you couldn't cast a second spell unless you lost a life in the process, unless you paid a life to do so. Would you pay a life to cast a second spell during your turn? Because that's what the pain lands are asking you to do. They're saying, do you need colored mana to cast another spell, or cast a spell in the first place? It's going to cost you a life, but that's 1 life to cast a spell. That's 100% worth it. If you didn't need the colored mana, you would just tap this for colorless mana. If you do need the colored mana, it's worth the life because it means an extra spell. You do that 6-7 times over the course of the game, yeah, you've lost 6, 7, 8 life, but you've cast 6, 7, or 8 more spells, and usually in Magic, the person who casts more spells is the person who's closer to winning. So all of these pain lands do hurt you when you tap, but you can tap them for colorless mana, and if you need the colored mana, you've got it available to you on untapped lands. Perfect. We're running the Tango lands as well. The Tango lands are dual-typed lands. So Prairie Stream is our example. This is a plains and an island, like that example I gave earlier. So we can fetch this with Karametra, we can fetch it with Farseek, whatever we may need, because Karametra finds plains, and Farseek can find plains and islands, and we're all set. And this will come in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. And of course it taps inherently for the colors that its basic types let it tap for. So since we can find basics so easily in this deck, this is not likely to happen for all of our Tango lands that we're bringing into play, but the ones we bring in later, like with Karametra, are likely to come in as untapped duels. Very, very nice to be able to fix our mana with these things. And remember, all of them are dual typed, which means they make it so our check lands are more likely to come in as untapped duels as well. Because as long as we have a let's say the Sunpetal Grove, it needs a forest or a plains in play. If we have this Sodden Verdure, it's a forest. So have that in play, and our Sunpetal Grove comes in and makes white mana for us right away. It's great. Finally, or not finally, I guess we actually have 5 lands left. We're running all 4 of the Tri-lands in our colors, because even though Path of Ancestry is a tap land that makes 4 colors, any tap land that makes 3 colors is also very strong for us. So we've got all 4 of the ones that can do that for us. They're just tap lands that make 3 colors. That's great for us. If you wanted to upgrade these, the Triomes are much more expensive, but they exist, like Spar's Headquarters and Rogren Triome. I think this is what this one is. Yeah, this is Jetmir's Garden, and this is the Teamer one from Ikoria. I'll think of it once the video's over, I'm sure. So yeah, you could definitely upgrade these to your Triomes, just like you could upgrade the Tangle lands, probably, to Shock lands. Much more expensive, but more powerful for us, and more likely to come in untapped. And the last land in our deck, the only utility land we're running, because we care so much about fixing our mana, and we have so many ways of accelerating ourselves and drawing cards. We don't need that much utility. We've got so much good stuff going on with our legends, that Demolition Field is the only one we need to touch. Because I mentioned earlier on, when we talked about Emergency Eject, that the pods I normally see these kind of decks being run at aren't looking for an experience where they have any kind of mana denial or land destruction, mass or otherwise, and that's totally fine. Not everyone wants that in their Magic games. But you do have to have an answer to the some problematic non-basics. Having it in your removal suite doesn't feel as, sparing, I guess I should say, or it gives you a temptation to use it if it's in your removal suite, versus something that's in your land base like Demolition Field. For example, if your opponent is running a Voltron deck and their commander is enormous and they have a Rogue's Passage, now their commander is unblockable and you're not going to be able to stop it. They're using their land base to make a land base as though it were like an enchantment or a spell that empowers their game plan. Or if we're trying to win with combat damage and our opponent's running a Glacial Chasm, I know, kind of a deep cut, no pun, but I have a friend that runs Glacial Chasm all the time. So that prevents us from executing our game plan. Any land that's doing things that are helping an opponent's game plan to that degree or hurting our ability to execute our own, that land is now a threat, and we should deal with the threat because it's a game of threats and answers. Demolition Field is my best answer for that, especially for the kind of pods that I'm describing who don't want land destruction. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we do destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and that opponent gets to search their library for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So we haven't lost a land even though we sacked our demo field, we got a basic. They haven't lost their land even though we destroyed it because they get to find a basic. Both of these basics are untapped. As long as we both have basics left in our libraries, neither of us is down a land, and probably not down mana either. Again, we don't want to just destroy someone's land because it's simply making 2 mana since it's like a bounce land. But if somebody's got Gaia's Cradle in play or something, that's crazy. Use your demo field on that and slow them down because that's what it's for. You should be able to answer that sort of thing even without costing them access to mana, just not so much mana. That's what we're doing with demo field in these kinds of decks. And that sums it up. Again, while scheduled Pride events are already over for the month, nothing stops you from playing this as a Rule 0 deck, especially during what's left of June, or anytime. I recommend playing these kinds of decks or encouraging your friends to build decks of their own like this throughout the year. Pride decks are so much fun. It's just a blast to be able to see how creative people can get and what kind of combinations of commanders they put together. It's just a good time. So yeah, happy Pride everyone. And thanks for watching. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic or becoming a member of this channel on YouTube. And remember, most of all, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.